All these people right here are the Antifa of Portland. All in black.
You come back, I'm gonna fucking smoke you, dude.
Really?
Yes.
You have a sniper lasered on you right now.
I don't give a
Stop it.
We're Portland. This is our mother. Keep it weird.
Portland is set to erupt right now. You have thousands of people out here protesting here in the streets of Portland, Oregon. Donald Trump has said this is war ravage and is sending into the streets of Oregon the federal government, and has said the feds can use full force against Antifa, who is now declared as a terrorist organization. Right now you have thousands of people here on the streets yelling, "Fight back" to the federal government. And here in Portland, Oregon, you have an ICE detention facility center that has been occupied by Antifa and protesters for more than 100 days. And assaults on ICE agents is up 1,000% since Trump took office for his second term. Who knows what will happen here in Portland? We're going to interview some of these protesters, and then we'll be going to that same ICE detention facility center where Antifa has one of their strongholds here in the United States. Antifa is now declared as a terrorist organization. Who knows what will happen? And now let's go hit the streets of Portland, Oregon, go talk to these protesters. So right now you have the governor of Oregon chanting, "Troops in Oregon, we say no. Hey, hey, ho, ho." Governor Bash, what's your message to Donald Trump for sending in the feds into Portland?
I had a press conference today. There's a statement online.
What, could you give us one right now?
No, we can fill you in later. Thank you.
Oh, come on, Governor Bash. Is this what democracy looks like? All right, the governor will not give a statement. Now they're chanting, "Whose streets? Our streets." What do you guys think about the feds coming into Portland?
It's wrong. It's completely wrong.
They say this is the stronghold of Antifa here in the United States, Portland, Oregon. Is Antifa a terrorist, do you think?
No, because anti-fascism is an ideology. It's not one thing you can attribute. If anti-fascists are showing up against your administration, what does that say about your admin?
And here, do you think the feds are needed to take down Antifa?
Doesn't look like it to me. I don't know. I'm not a scientist.
Do you think Antifa is a terrorist organization?
I don't think Antifa plays any role in it whatsoever. Where's Antifa? Are they here? I don't know who they are. I'm just a proud American veteran who is fighting fascism. What's happening in our government is wrong. It's anti-American, and any patriotic American should be out here just demonstrating against what's happening.
The largest and most known fascist in world history is Hitler. Where would you rank Trump?
If you look at the first 2 or 3 years of Hitler's rise to power, he did not imprison as many people as Trump has.
So Trump's imprisoned more people than Hitler in his first 2 or 3 years?
Yeah, exactly. To what, 2,000-3,000 people a day? That's far less than were imprisoned during the first 2 years of Hitler in Nazi Germany.
Do you think bringing the feds was necessary here to Portland?
No.
What do you guys think about Antifa, him declaring Antifa as a terrorist organization?
I think it demonstrates that he doesn't know what Antifa is.
Because these people here are anti-fascist, but the idea of Antifa as an organization, is that such a thing?
No, it would be like saying MAGA is a terrorist organization. That MAGA is not an organization in the way that Antifa is not an organization. It's incoherent.
And Trump has said this is war-ravaged Portland. Is this a war-ravaged city?
Show me where the war is. Point to it.
It was not war ravaged during the Black Lives Matters protests either. I was part of a Buddhist group, and we would go out at about 5 o'clock in the evening in Chapman Square, where at night there would be all the stuff going on. We would do peaceful walks. Never a problem. No one bothered us. We would see people setting up for the nighttime stuff, but it was all fine.
If this is war ravaged, like I said, all wars should look like this. This is my fervent prayer.
Do I look like a domestic terrorist to you? I'm a boomer. I'm a septuagenarian, and Donald Trump thinks I'm a threat to America? What's he smoking? He's a total fascist.
Ma'am, you're moving pretty quick for a boomer. Look at you. You're pulling it and everything.
That's right. Got to move when you have to. You know, I got to sit back for a few years taking it easy, but now it's not the time. We have to fight for everything we can get.
Are you part of Antifa?
Oh, yeah, right. Am I against fascism? Hell yeah, but it's not an organization. It's a philosophy. It's an ideology. It's just an excuse, a pretext for the government to find a way to invade our cities.
So you're not a terrorist?
No.
I don't think you look like a terrorist, ma'am.
No, not lately.
You're moving too quick with the walker to be a terrorist.
Yeah, totally.
So these people right here are anti-fascist. That's an ideology. But the group of Antifa is different. That's who Donald Trump has declared as terrorists, the organization of Antifa, the group of people that receive funding from groups to then go out and incite political violence against their opposition, as they are part of the group of and the organization of Antifa. Most of these people just have the ideology of being anti-fascist, which is not a bad thing. Nobody supports fascism, and nobody wants violence, or nobody wants a fascist dictator here in the United States. But the difference is between these people and Antifa is an organization who have now been declared as terrorists. These people, these old boomers right here, are not terrorists. They have the ideology of being anti-fascist, and they believe Trump is a king and a dictator, but I would not consider these people as terrorists. So you have that protest going on, and now we're heading over to the main protest, where a rally from Antifa is set to take place, as they have been controlling and occupying the outside of this ICE detention facility center for over 100 days. And who knows what's gonna happen here. We're heading over right now. All right, we made it here to the ICE detention facility. Here you have all of the protesters. They're all outside of the ICE detention facility. Put the mask on, we don't want to blow cover too quickly. So this right here is the ICE detention facility center, where they do hold illegal migrants once ICE has gone out and got them. And right here you see all of the protesters. These guys, for instance, are all in black. They do not want to show their face. Those are potential members of Antifa. Antifa has had control of this location outside, occupying it for the past 100 days or so. And now this is set to be their rally. Let's see, they're handing out piggies. Little piggies that squeak. Calling the police and the feds pigs. Bubbles, not bullets, right?
Right.
So why do you put the bubbles out?
It's an indicator, just like balloons. You watch where it's gonna go, that's where the gas is gonna go.
And how long have you been protesting out here for?
Well, I've been protesting in different cities across the country now since they broke out early this summer. So,
what makes you so enthusiastic about protesting?
Because there's a lot to protest. There's a lot that's wrong, that's going on. A lot of people aren't buying the bullshit from Trump, basically.
What do you think they should do with illegal migrants if they are here illegally? For instance, because the last 4 years underneath Joe Biden, there was like over 10 million. Should they all just be allowed to stay here, or how should Trump go about doing that?
Well, first of all, I don't think anyone's illegal. I think that's just kind of like a hot button word that's used to basically create a us and them mentality, take away somebody's humanity by saying they're illegal.
And Jonathan, you've been covering Antifa for a very long time. How dangerous and how violent are these people?
Look, at the end of the day, the goal is to overthrow the U.S. government. They want revolution. They're here to destabilize America. They hate capitalism. They believe in Marxism, communism, and that's what they're trying to bring in and usher in right now. And authorities, the cops, these officers, this is the direct defense against any type of communist takeover, and that's why they're constantly being targeted.
I'm going back into the craziness right now, but before I get back into the craziness, I want to tell you about the sponsor of this video, Opus Clip. What used to just be an AI editor has now become the fastest and most powerful AI growth tool for all creators. Right now, over 10 million creators and businesses use Opus, and it's helped generate over 61 billion views. And Opus is super simple. All you do is you upload your video or copy a YouTube link into Opus, and it'll then edit those videos into viral shorts. That way it saves you hours of your own time.
Your hosts, Terry daughter. And all of a sudden, she came home one day and she looked like this. Actually, very lovely. But it's not exactly what you normally see at the shopping center in suburbia, is it?
I don't know. It depends.
Tell me what happened when your mother and or father first...
Now, see my Mickey Mouse tie.
Jack doesn't look like a rebel, does he? But underneath this sweater, you've got to see, as long as we've referred to it now, right?
Do I have to pull it?
You've got to do it, yeah. Come on, let's take a nice close-up. Can we see this, baby?
Mickey Mouse.
I don't know if you can see that. Now, this is an incredible rebellion, Jack. I'm amazed that you're...
time, and today we're going to do something I don't know if putting it off is the word I want to use.
something I just kind of decided I didn't want to do. We're going to go through a short essay from 1997 by Alexander Dugin. I've been trying to avoid talking about Dugin, except to maybe mention him here and there. I don't think he should be taken nearly as seriously as he is, but he is taken very seriously, as it turns out, by people on what I'm calling the woke right. You can call him the dissident right, you can call him the new right, you can call him the post-liberal right, you can call him whatever you want, I don't care, but I've called him the woke right. And it's kind of funny. Dugin is a weird character. He is sometimes called Putin's brain. I think that that's likely not to be true. He is a Russian philosopher, if we use the word rather generously. There are strong reasons to believe that he was or still is a Satanist. He's a very peculiar character. He's a weirdo. He's like a Dungeons and Dragons kind of dork. So it's difficult to imagine Vladimir Putin taking this man seriously, except in the sense that Putin can use this guy's philosophy to justify the stuff that Putin wants to do anyway. So I would not assume that we should ignore completely what Dugin is saying, or the claim that he's so-called Putin's brain. I would guess that to the degree that that's even true, which I don't think is very high, honestly, that Putin is using Dugin's ideas to justify stuff he wants to do, regardless of the rest of Dugin's ideas or character or personality. But my strongest suspicion with this guy is that he's basically a psyops. He's an export from Russia to America. And so tying him to Putin with this whole kind of, frisson on the far right after the Ukraine conflict or Ukraine war, that Putin's somehow like the good guy for the American right. What's the logic of that, by the way? Okay, so the Ukraine war sucks. We can all say that one way or the other. What happened was Putin attacked Ukraine. The Democrats then dump God knows how much money and effort and propaganda and BS behind Zelensky and so on into the Ukraine conflict. And so it becomes this Republican versus Democrat kind of polarized issue. I don't care, for the purposes of what we're talking about now, what the deal in Ukraine is or with Russia. I'm not taking a side on the war for the present commentary. I don't even have to get into it. I'm just saying that what happened in America is that the Democrats strongly backed Ukraine, and therefore the far right Republicans decided that they were anti-Ukraine, kind of in like one lump for kind of silly reasons. And so my guess is that this caused this kind of frisson of cool on the radical or far right in the US that was looking up to Putin as this like great leader who's the anti-democrat character, and he's doing all this, we're getting all this Russian propaganda, I should say, about all this stuff he's doing about revitalizing Christianity, which is probably fake for the most part. There's been all these great Russian propaganda videos. I'm not going to get into it about how like they have natural gas. It's like poking at all the Democrat policies, Christianity, real and beautiful women, and so on. It's propaganda. But at any rate, the idea that this Alexander Dugin guy is Putin's brain then passes along this pathway. This is all I'm trying to say with all this nonsense. Dugin gets laundered into the American right, so we'll call him intelligentsia, post-liberal thinker orbit through this kind of anti-democrat left versus right dialectic happening here in the US. And so Dugin is taken more seriously by characters on the woke right, including, say, R.N. McIntyre, that's in scare quotes. R.N. McIntyre is not his real name, at the Blaze Media, which I call him the Blaze Media propagandist, and others. And it's quite clear that, the laundering of Dugin's ideas is prominent there. When R.N. McIntyre recently appeared on Tucker Carlson's podcast, a few pretty astute observers that I saw on X gave pretty detailed accounts for why what R.N. was doing was merely regurgitating or repackaging Alexander Dugin's so-called fourth political theory for an American audience and delivering it through the medium of Tucker Carlson's podcast. And I think that that's a actually strong and good read. So that's one of the first things about Alexander Dugin you have to think about, is that he had this concept called the fourth political theory. That makes you wonder, well, what are the other three? They are liberalism, fascism, and communism. And his view is that it's time for a fourth one. And this podcast is going to be kind of about that, but we're not going to talk specifically about the fourth political theory, which is one of it's Dugin's most famous work. Instead, this tweet came out, or post on X came out yesterday as of this recording, which is on Labor Day. So it came out at the last of August. And Alexander Dugin says, R.N. McIntyre, somehow I forgot the scare quotes around R.N.'s fake name. R.N. McIntyre is someone really deep and important. He is responsible and serious. I wish MAGA are like him. That is a hope. Okay, so he gets the full and unvarnished endorsement. R.N. McIntyre gets the full and unvarnished endorsement of Alexander Dugin. So it seems reasonable that maybe we do have to talk about Dugin's philosophy. Now, Dugin's kind of a dialectical thinker, but not in the straight kind of Hegelian way. There's elements of that. But this is what the idea of fourth political theory is that through the 20th century, or if you want to expand it to the middle of the 19th to the kind of end of the 20th, we have had a long run of something we could call the modern era. The modern era is maybe coming to or has come to a close and into a postmodern era. That's its own question. But during the modern era, there were these three political systems. Before that, we had tribalism, we had, absolute monarchy and this kind of stuff. Well, in the modern era, we didn't do that. We had these three systems: liberalism, communism, and fascism. And now that we're moving into a new general era, we need a fourth political theory that takes elements of each of those and moves it forward into this, whether it's postmodern or whatever world we live in now that has left the modern era behind. That's his thought. And so it's going to allegedly combine some of the aspects of communism, fascism, and liberalism into a new system. Now, this is not identical to, but is similar to the regime that Patrick Deneen, a woke right post-liberal thinker from Notre Dame, puts forth in his book called Regime Change from 2023, which our current sitting vice president has endorsed rather strongly and agreed with. And Patrick Deneen says that his idea of he doesn't want to have like a military coup or something to overthrow the sitting government. What he wants is far more radical than that. That's actually a quote he gave regarding this book that he had written. And the idea that he wants actually is to have a complete change of political regime, not a change of personage, but constitutional order in the U.S. He wants to replace the current constitution that we have with what's called a mixed constitution that mixes a kind of ecclesial monarchy, so like a church king, like a religious king, and then that mixes with an aristocracy that basically kind of runs things, that has noblesse oblige. You'll notice that the woke right talk about this idea a lot, that you have to have these virtuous leaders. This is all coming from Deneen, who have a sense of what their nobility means and why they, rule, and it's to take care of the people beneath them. You'll hear them say a lot that the current regime or the liberal regime doesn't care about its citizens. P.S. it's not supposed to. The state caring about citizens is not the greatest idea, but it's supposed to have this, like I said, absolute monarchy that's kind of religiously backed, and that's going to give you the virtues and the unbound executive. Then it's going to be combined with a virtuous aristocracy. I'm sure they have a means for choosing who those virtuous aristocrats will be. I'm sure it's themselves and people who agree with their philosophy. And then it will have a limited amount of what we consider to be liberal or representative democracy. In other words, a little bit of republic mixed in. You'll hear this with Aaron all the time. When you talk to Tucker Carlson, he spent a lot of time, for example, talking about how the republic has already fallen, that we don't have a republic anymore. He usually harkens back to Machiavelli to talk about what the republic actually is and what it should be. So then he makes arguments like the fact that we have a standing army means that the republic is already gone. The fact that we're not following the Constitution means that the republic is already gone, and on and on and on. So if the republic is already gone, we need to live in reality. Therefore, we need to embrace the fact that the Constitution is dead. Therefore, we need to move on to something new. And what he would endorse is something akin to Patrick Deneen's regime change, or akin to Alexander Dugin's fourth political theory, as people have spotted. And of course, now I've quoted to you where Alexander Dugin has endorsed R.N. McIntyre explicitly. R.N. McIntyre is someone really deep and important. No, he's not. He looks like a homeless person. Then again, so does Dugin. He is responsible and serious. No, he's not. Almost everything he says is a lie. I don't even think he's capable of saying a single true thing. Like all the way from the beginning of a sentence to the end of a sentence. I'm not sure he can get one that's out that's completely true. I wish MAGA are like him. I don't. That is a hope. So that's his endorsement. So let's read a couple more tweets from Alexander Dugin, and then we're going to read an essay from 1997 that Dugin wrote called Fascism, Borderless, and Red, that describes his political philosophy. So here's one. This is from the 3rd of February this year. Vibe shift to the right is evident. We're reading Dugin on X. It is omnipresent. We observe it everywhere. If that is not conservative revolution, what is it? The country's return to nationalism, closed borders, tariffs, and sovereignties at high speed. Elon Musk deleting USAID shows what right woke means. So he uses the term woke right, as do I, but he calls it right woke instead of left woke. And he's endorsing right woke, right? MAGA is very unforgiving. He quotes Donald Trump on 10th of February, and it should be like that. If we don't destroy them on next turn, they will certainly destroy us. So don't let this, quote, next turn happen. Right woke is this. Cancel those who cancel us. Okay, so you have this idea here of the woke right. He says on the 5th of January, so before all of this, and in fact, the day before Donald Trump, his election is certified. Remember that happened on infamously January 6th. So on 5 January this year, Alexander Dugin put on X, now it is time for American right woke to make regime change. American business as usual in Europe. The goal is to remake now what American left woke has made. Now notice that what you're seeing all around the woke right today now are calls for the CIA to do, under Trump, to do a color revolution in the UK and in the European countries to chase this stuff out. 11th of March. Being under attack, Elon Musk has forgotten a bit to overthrow globalists, Starmer and Macron, and to continue making Europe great again. It is a pity. Soros acted stubbornly and constantly. Right woke shouldn't pause. 4th of January, so even before this, we need the access to AI core. There is a left woke AI. There is a neutral AI, Grok. There should be a right woke AI. 1st of January, the first day of 2025, Overton window, which he's Russian, Overton window, is moving very swiftly. Woke is almost forgotten in less than a month. It looks like Stone Age agenda. LGBT, transhumanism, feminism, Neanderthal concepts. Maybe he should talk to Peter Thiel about that. Right woke is already ruling. Remember, Peter Thiel just recently gave that infamous interview with Ross Douthat at the New York Times, where he said that what makes transgender so weird is that it's so primitive and barbaric. You're just trying to change your genitals. You're not trying to change your, say, entire body or your mind or your soul, and gives a full-throated defense of transhumanism. On the 24th of March, we have Laura Loomer quote tweeting President Trump, or tweeting a video of President Trump doing one of his like hardline things. Alexander Dugin quote tweets it and says, right woke begins. And it goes on and on. So this guy's all in on this woke right idea, but he thinks it's a good thing and that it should be calling for regime change. And it should have a regime change not just in Europe, but also through maybe CIA interference, but also here in the US. And it is time for that. So back in 1997, remember that the Soviet Union collapses in 1992. They had this kind of pretend short period of time before Putin got kind of full power, where they pretended that they were going to have something like a Western-style democracy. Then obviously we've established this kind of Russian national capitalist oligarchy run by the Putin regime. And this is going to give us some color for why I don't think that Dugin really is Putin's brain. But he writes this essay in that condition, and he starts off, it's a very short essay, it's only 3 pages. This is one of the reasons I didn't do it for a podcast before, so this won't take super long to get through now that we've had this introduction. He starts off by saying, there are in the 20th century only 3 ideologies that have managed to demonstrate that their principles are realistic in terms of their political administrative implementation. These are liberalism, communism, and fascism. Okay, so that's like I said. So his view is that there needs to be a 4th political theory that integrates pieces of all of them. Remember, the title of the essay is Fascism, Borderless, and Red. So what aspects do you see here? Fascism is the model. Borderless is this kind of liberal globalist vision that he's taking. And then red is communist, or also National Socialist, or violent. He says it's because it's the color of their blood, so it's also going to be bloody. As much as one may like to, Dugin says, it is impossible to name another model of society which would not be one of the forms of these ideologies and which at the same time existed in reality. There are liberal countries, there are communist countries, and there are fascist or nationalist countries. So here you have him equating fascism and nationalism. That's a very interesting thing. Now, just a quick, sidebar. Patriotism means loving your country. A nation is generally considered to be a group of people that are bound by some kind of national spirit or characteristics. Therefore, nationalism is loving your people, putting your ground for your national project in the people rather than something else. So in the United States, obviously, we have the Declaration defining the core principles of the United States and the Constitution, and we don't have this predetermined set of people to whom it's supposed to apply. So it's not nationalistic in the sense that we're talking about here. But Dugin, this isn't me doing some kind of interpretation. Dugin himself says fascist parentheses nationalist, as if nationalist and fascist are somehow the same thing. He says others are absent, so there's no other forms of countries in the modern era. And he says, not just are they absent, he says, and are impossible. In Russia, we have passed 2 ideological stages, the communist and the liberal. What remains is fascism. Okay, so this is a little weird because very famously, first of all, he's talking about stages, like history's progressing through different stages and it has to go through these different, periods. And there are different models for that, right? So Marx had a linear model where primitive communism gives way to slavery, gives way to feudalism, gives way to capitalism, gives way to socialism, gives way to eventually the fully realized communism on the global scale, right? So there's this linear model of stages. Other thinkers, like Peter Thiel's kind of mentor, Leo Strauss, he wrote the essay Our Straussian Moment back in like 2002 or 3 or whatever it was, right after 9/11. So other thinkers like Leo Strauss conceive of this more like in a circle. So it's like you could imagine that a country goes through a liberal phase, and then that leads to a communist phase, and then that leads to a fascist reaction, and then that means people don't like that, so they go back to liberal phase. Leo Strauss's idea is that this works a little bit like the ocean, where it's like waves coming to shore, because he wants to make the point that with each successive wave, elements of the previous wave are there. So the wave comes up onto the beach, the water washes back, and when the next wave comes, some of that same water comes up again, right? And so when the liberal phase goes, and then it starts to ebb, and communism floods in to take its place, it's going to have a lot of liberal characteristics. And when then that ebbs and fascism floods in, it's going to take on a lot of the characteristics actually of the communism. And when that ebbs, in's going to come a new liberalism, but it's going to have taken on characteristics of the fascism. And so you have this kind of eternal churn through history that works in a kind of cyclical fashion about which is dominant. Now, it's hard not to identify this as being pretty Hegelian, except that Hegel had the idea that this churn, this wheel of history grinds down to a single point. Of course, Pierre Teilhard de Chardin had the same idea. We did one podcast about him. I started reading more of his book. It was so weird I didn't know what to do with it. So I haven't made more podcasts about him yet. But his was the idea that you grind down toward what he called the omega point, the final point of history. So now we understand that Dugin's thinking that there are these discrete phases and these kind of currents of history, and whether he believes in a cyclical model of history, which I think he does, like Leo Strauss, or whether he believes in a linear model like Marx, which maybe he actually has some elements of that, I don't know, or whether he believes in one that's kind of Hegelian and drills down to a point is not quite clear. I don't know his thinking that well to specify, but he does believe in this kind of stagist model of history, and that history therefore has a purpose and a telos, that it's going somewhere, right? But here is the curious part. In Russia, he says we have passed 2 ideological stages, the communist and the liberal. What remains is fascism. So he's writing this in 1997. He's not writing this in 2025, right? It's very difficult to figure out when Russia was liberal. It wasn't liberal before. It was feudal before the communists took over in 1917. So then it was communist. It went from feudal, which is a pre-modern arrangement. It's not one of the modern arrangements. Then it went into a communist arrangement. It's straight. So it started in communism as far as the modern conceptions go. And the only place that you have liberalism to stick in there is in the 5 years from 1992, with a completely disorganized, collapsed state, till the 1997, that 5-year period when Alexander Dugin's writing this. So they had their good 5 years of Potemkin fake liberalism that never really got off the ground, that was immediately being run by all of the old Soviet bosses for oligarchical means, which eventually gets taken over by Putin, who's a KGB officer who rules this thing with an iron fist as a national capitalist oligarchy. Some people might describe it as a kleptocracy, government by theft. However you want to characterize it, I don't know. What remains, he says, is fascism. So it's time for Russia to take away from these stages of communism and liberalism, whatever liberalism it ever had, and go into fascism. And now here's the thing, is this is what this essay is about, fascism, borderless, and red. So it's time for fascism, but this fascism is going to have to incorporate those elements of the other things, thus his so-called 4th political theory, which I remind you, the same R.N. McIntyre that Alexander Dugin just praised on X, the same one on Tucker Carlson 2 weeks ago, probably catching Alexander Dugin's attention, regurgitated and Americanized repackaging of fourth political theory or Dugin's ideas for a gigantic conservative audience. Hence me wanting to go through this essay. If Alexander Dugin is going to endorse R.N. McIntyre and R.N. McIntyre is going to repeat Dugin-esque ideas on huge stages, maybe we should know what Dugin thinks. So let's go through this essay. That was the introduction, the whole thing. It's, like I said, very short. 1. Against national capitalism. So this new fascism is going to be against the thing that you could pretty easily argue that Putin is running. Now, a lot of you are going to think about Mussolini when you think about fascism, and you're going to think about the corporatism, and you're going to make this argument that national capitalism is in some sense what the fascists ran. And Dugin's going to be very clear that that's not it. In fact, that's also not what they're going to do with this new fascism, but that's not even the right elements of fascism. It mischaracterizes fascism. So he says one of the versions of fascism, so there are more than one ways to conceive of fascism.
The reason we're here, and I don't think you would argue that this is unnecessary, the assassination in cold blood is we do have the sources here that we make this available, so you can take the QR code. So what would make you, because you seem very confident that Hortman's was political violence, and then it's nuanced with Charlie Kirk. Why?
Oh, I didn't say it was nuanced at all with Charlie Kirk. I agreed with you after considering your question that it was a political.
If that doesn't constitute political violence that could be answered in the affirmative immediately, of course, what would? Like, what would be required to say, oh, this is clearly an act of political violence or political terrorism, if not Charlie Kirk?
I agreed that it was political violence, so I'm not sure where this question's coming from.
Well, I'm saying because you came in and pointed to an example that would be in the gray area, the Hortmans, and took a long time to agree with that premise of Charlie Kirk. And so what if we don't know enough information? So Charlie Kirk would be very clear left-wing political violence.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sure.
Great.
Yes.
So there are more examples of that coming from the left than the right. That's the premise, yes.
Okay. So you're saying clear examples of political violence. I
Yes.
hear you using clear
violence carried out as a means to a political end.
So there's clear information, data that shows us that the left is violent or is more violent than the right.
Yes. Not only in crime statistics, but also in the polling after Charlie Kirk's death. Now, I believe that you're discussing this in good faith, and I would assume that you roundly condemn political violence of all stripes.
Of course.
So do I. Just to be clear, I think we both are. That's why we're sitting at a table having a conversation.
Right.
Do you identify as more liberal or conservative?
I like to think I'm moderate because I hold some conservative views and some liberal views, and I wish we could have a little bit more moderation in our country.
Like sitting down and having discussions?
Exactly.
Okay.
Like things like this.
Because we get killed for it anyway.
Right. Yeah.
Only the right. Only the right gets killed for this anyway. You're seeing the one that got through. The reason I stopped doing this for years is because every single time out was a violent attack. Sometimes it was a rock. Sometimes it was a milkshake, could be concrete, acid, chocolate, vanilla, I don't know. Doxing, firebombings, Molotov cocktails. Maya Angelou spoke at SMU only a few years before my first time here, didn't need this kind of security. And you can see it if you observe your speakers here. And I'll tell you why that is. If you look at the polls post-assassination of Charlie Kirk, and you label yourself as a moderate, those who identify as liberal support political violence at a ratio of 6-1 to conservatives. The YouGov poll said, is political violence acceptable? 77% of conservatives said not at all. Only 38% of those on the left said not at all. 62% of those on the left said somewhat to completely acceptable. We see the same stats after the attempted assassination of Donald Trump. We see the same stats after the firebombings of the Tesla dealership. And we see the same stats on the opposite side, those on the right roundly condemning political violence. The lowest
Oh, environmentalism, climate change. Do you know what a threat to our country is? We're not having enough babies. Now, my wife and I, we are doing our part. We have 2 young children. And we'll see what else the Lord has in store. From Ted Cruz, but good job, guys, last weekend. That's all I'm going to say.
known as Pepper's Ghost, showing now on the relay screens. Thanks in part to the amazing optical properties of the eyeliner foil, combined with the light and picture output of Christie Digital high-definition projectors, the image has depth and opacity that actually supersedes the scale and definition of traditional 3D hologram.
Like I said before, 10 foot squared, 9 foot tall. This canopy was made this size for a purpose, because it is a hologram stage projection that you guys were watching. It's all smoke and mirrors. The world is a stage, people. Get over it. You've been lied to. Now, I know a lot of you going to say, well, Terry, if it was a hologram, how was he walking around passing out hats and talking to people? Because he was walking around passing out hats and talking to people. Only the assassination was a hologram. Here's what you're forgetting. You're forgetting about the trap door right by his feet underneath that little canopy there.
This is the courtyard where it all happened. It's now open to the public again. There's lots of people coming here, placing flowers, cards, things like that. The university is already making some changes. They're replacing the grass where Charlie Kirk was speaking with pavers. And there are several petitions online asking the school to make this into a permanent memorial for Charlie Kirk.
You see, the trap door is the whole key. Yes, Charlie was passing out hats. Yes, Charlie was there. But when it was time for the hologram to come on, this is when Charlie went down into this little utility room or whatever this is underneath this trap door, the stage area where he was sitting. Okay, the assassination took place with the hologram, and then if you notice, all the guys, when he supposedly falls to the ground, all the security guys surround him, you can't see nothing. They raise the trap door up, he comes out, and then they carry him to an SUV. Not an ambulance, not anything like it would normally be, to the SUV, without a trail of blood anywhere, because he never got shot. He was down in there the whole time. The hologram part of the assassination was taking place. It's really, really simple. It's complicated, but it's simple if you think about it coming sensely. That's how Charlie was able to interact with the people there, because he could hear what they were saying and he could answer them and interact with them, just like the musicians from London to Florida.
It's incredible that this really is a remote live gig. The signal from London takes less than a third of a second to go all the way around the world and be projected as a hologram on the stage in the US, as well as the hologram making it feel like the
Okay, fine. You either die a hero, or you live long enough to see yourself become the villain.
Have truer words ever been spoken? Perhaps. But if so, it was likely on October 25th, 1991. Nirvana headlined. Cobain said that he saw a picture in the news of a Republican Party headquarters in Pasadena that had been firebombed, and that this was a beautiful picture. In fact, Kurt thought that the picture of the GOP headquarters with smoke coming out the windows belonged on a Christmas card.
So I saw this picture on the news about 3 weeks ago. It was a Republican Party headquarters in Pasadena. It was firebombed. It was a beautiful picture. It was a picture of the Republican Party headquarters in Pasadena. There was a window and there was smoke and fire coming out of it. It was really pretty. To be on Christmas hour.
She also went on to say, "Did you know that I'm gay? Then I got married to a hermaphrodite, but they're trying to take away my gay rights. I would have been really mad because I really like to butt fuck. It's fun. It feels good."
Did you know that I'm gay? Then I got married to a hermaphrodite. But if someone tried to take away my gay rights, I would have been really mad because I really like to butt fuck. It's fun. It feels good.
Later during the concert, a Guns N' Roses fan hopped on stage and urged Kurt Cobain to make peace with the band, saying, "Hey man, Guns N' Roses played awesome music and Nirvana plays awesome music. Let's just get along and work this out, man." To which Cobain responded, "No kid, you're really wrong. Those people are total sexist jerks, and the reason we're playing this show is to fight homophobia in a real small way. Axl Rose is a fucking sexist and a racist and a homophobe, and you can't be on his side and our side." Measure 9 was ultimately defeated in the November 3rd, 1992 general election, and we all lived happily ever after.
Earl, members of the board, my name is Craig Schubert. I'm the mayor of this city. It has come to my attention that your educators are distributing essentially what is child pornography in the classroom. I've spoken to a judge this evening. She's already confirmed that. So I'm going to give you a simple choice. You either choose to resign from this Board of Education, or you will be charged. Thank you.
In July of 1993, Kurt Cobain gave an interview with PBS in which he first called his own mother a homophobe and then went on to bemoan that women aren't treated with enough respect and are just like totally oppressed, man.
Although I never experimented with it, I had a gay friend, and then my mother wouldn't allow me to be friends with him anymore because, well, she's homophobic. Because I couldn't find any friends, male friends, that I felt compatible with, I ended up hanging out with girls a lot, and I just always felt that they weren't treated with respect, especially because women are totally oppressed. I mean, the word bitch and are totally common.
On September 13th, 1993, Nirvana released In Utero, and in the liner notes for the album, they wrote, "If you're a sexist, racist, homophobe, or basically an asshole, don't buy this CD. I don't care if you like me, I hate you." On March 1st, 1994, Nirvana played their last show in Munich, Germany. Cobain had been struggling with his voice on numerous occasions leading up to the show. In Munich, he struggled to hit the notes on heart-shaped box before he ultimately thanked the audience and said goodnight. For many, his vocal troubles indicated substance abuse, as well as trouble with his wife Courtney. About a month later, as I'm sure you all know, Kurt would peacefully sunset himself. Now, obviously, I'm not here to suggest that that isn't a tragedy and a great loss, because it is, and I hope if anybody is struggling with the feeling of being at the end of their rope, they'll get help, because things can always get better, and life is a precious gift which shouldn't be taken for granted. Having said that, if Kurt Cobain was still around and using the website twitter.com, can you imagine how insufferable he would be given what we've just looked at? Keep it
to fight for the soul of our nation, but often lack opportunities to make positive political and cultural changes. Unquote. Another one. By empowering faith leaders and individuals to stand for biblical values, together we'll equip Christians in our nation to make a positive impact for the glory of God. End quote. But since when are believers supposed to fight for the soul of the nation? What about the eternal souls of individuals? These patriotic, dominionist, Christian nationalist movements and promoters may use the word Christian, faith, and God, but their focus is not on the gospel and the salvation of souls, and this is tragic. Please mark and avoid Rob McCoy and the others mentioned above. And like I said, this is from 2022. Here's another interesting segment that she was, from the article she was referring to. It says, in a segment that would likely be jarring to many Christians who revere the King James translation of the Bible, McCoy cited the scriptural conversation between Jesus and his disciple Peter. "Upon this rock I shall build my," McCoy said, allowing the congregation to fill in the final word, church. To which McCoy said, no. McCoy told congregants that King James wrongly translated the term ecclesia as church, when some earlier translators chose the word assembly. Dominionists who believe conservative Christians should be running things on earth frequently use the word ecclesia to refer to the church acting with governmental authority as God's legislative body bringing kingdom rule to the earth.
So, let's start with Charlie Kirk giving the gospel presentation.
For those of you that are not yet believers, it's very simple. You're going to have a court date. We all die. And you're all going to meet the supreme judge of the universe. Justice is getting what you deserve, which is going to a not so good place. We're all sinners and we all fall short of the glory of God. But thanks to the cross, a perfect loving God who came down in human form, human flesh, lived a perfect life and died for us so that we could live forever. At that moment, we're about to get that sentencing into eternal damnation. Somebody says, no, I know him. I know her. Welcome to eternal life. You have an opportunity. The gospel in 4 words is Jesus took my place. 3 words is him for me. 2 words is substitutionary atonement. And 1 word is grace. Grace, you cannot earn. Grace, you do not pay for. It doesn't matter how much money you give to the hospital. You can't earn it. It doesn't matter if you're a good person. It doesn't matter if you have always done the best you can, because what's different about Christianity is that it's a gift for all of humanity to receive regardless of everything that we have done. And your life will be transformed. You will be born again. Grace is not earned. It is given by a God who loves you and wants to spend eternity with you. It is the most important decision you can make in your life. Here I am. God bless you guys. Thank you so much.
Charlie Kirk once pushed a secular worldview. Now he's fighting to make America Christian again. 6 years ago, Charlie Kirk, a right-wing provocateur who funded the conservative activist group Turning Point USA, and I've talked to foundation, not funded, Charlie criticizes the evangelical political movement he now helps to lead. Kirk, known then primarily for his work mobilizing college-age Republicans, described Jesus as welcoming and tolerant and denounced Christians' sanctimonious approach to homosexuality and other issues. He argued politics should be advanced to a secular worldview and slammed attempts by the evangelical right beginning in the 1970s to impose their version of morality through government policy. We do have a separation of church and state, Kirk told the conservative commentator and homosexual Dave Rubin in 2018, and we should support that. Kirk, now 30, has since reversed his position. It's a transformation that, according to political and religious scholars, embodies and reinforces a growing embrace of Christian nationalist thinking within the Republican Party in the era of Donald Trump. There is no separation of church and state, Kirk said on his podcast, and I verified he said it in 2022. It's a fabrication, it's fiction, it's not in the Constitution, it's made up by secular humanists. Okay. So, let's continue. The modern apostles want to use the Seven Mountains mandate to reshape America and the world ahead of the end times. And my friend and dear sister in Christ, Laura from Magical Mystery Church, has done a lot of research, talking about the NAR and the Seven Mountains mandate. My friend Menno and his website NAR Connections has done a lot of research, pushing forth the NAR and the false Seven Mountains mandates and dominionism. Aaron Foshman from Underground Publishing has done streams pushing against, Christian nationalism and post-millennialism and all-millennialism. And so, yeah, there's a lot of issues with the Seven Mountains mandate and the New Apostolic Reformation. I myself have discussed it on this channel. Okay. So, the movement provides supernatural justification for the politics and theory of government of the Christian right, not to mention emphasis on prosperity, and one that understands the shifting demographics of the United States. We'll see why Christians become an ever-increasing minority in the coming decades. The doctrine is already making its way into conservative political circles beyond those who believe that God speaks to them directly. At a conservative political action conference last month, this back 2020, college campus activist and Turning Point USA founder Charlie Kirk declared that we finally have a president that understands the Seven Mountains of cultural influence, and that's about the Seven Mountains mandate. So, did he say that? Yes, he did.
We'll get you thumbs up, high fives, and invites to all the coolest parties. You want to be a rebel, wear that hat on a college campus. You want to see what true rebellion is? Try walking around Brown, Yale, Princeton, Stanford, UCLA with that hat. But I'll tell you, finally, we have a president that understands the Seven Mountains of cultural influence. The Seven Mountains of cultural influence. Finally, we have a president that understands the significance of standing, yes, I'm going to use a term, in solidarity with the grassroots activists of our country that see that college conservatives are under attack. And President Trump courageously signed a historic executive order to protect free speech on college campuses across the country. It was a year ago at CPAC he made that announcement. One of the most important executive orders that he has signed in his presidency. And so America has a choice. The left, we know exactly where they're going to go. However, as we look into this election and even into elections to come, we have to ask ourselves a question as a conservative movement. Are we going to revert back to the party of the status quo ruling class, of Mitt Romney, of open borders, making China continually get rich, and just being a technocratic governing ruling class? Or are we going to learn from what I call the MAGA doctrine, which is a doctrine of American renewal, revival, one that America is the greatest country in.
This is a Charlie Kirk post that is now probably infamous. We talk about a golden age in America. I am an evangelical Christian, but I pray the new Pope will help usher in a new golden age of Christianity. If the new Pope defends the faith, defends the West, defends biology and eternal truths, I will be his biggest fan. About the golden age. In the shortest way possible, the golden age is the new age. The new age is the old age. It's the ancient times. It is actually considered to be the time of Atlantis, that they consider the golden age when the gods walked among us. The time of Atlantis was followed by a great flood that destroyed it, which is the antediluvian world that God sent a flood to destroy. And remember, Jesus said that the days before he returns would be like the days of Noah. So they're trying to bring back the world that God destroyed because it was so violent and wicked. I'm not saying Charlie Kirk is. I'm saying that's like the esoteric occult meaning of it. Well, here we are at the memorial service, and I did not watch all of it. My daughter started texting me, so I watched a few parts, like Jack Posobiec, which really creeped her out, Stephen Miller, which really creeped me out, Frank Turek, which was good. So it was a lot of different things, and different people have different reactions, you know. My personal feeling was it seemed like very well produced. I've never seen anything like this for any other human being that ever lived. And it felt like a beginning or a turning point in a very political, religious union. And I don't know what your thoughts are. I know I've listened to a lot of different people, like Alyssa Childers, Mike Winger, different people who've had a lot of positive things to say. about the gospel presentation and different things like that, and I think that's good. But overall, I feel like this will accelerate and give momentum to everything I've been warning about. I'm going to share with you just some different posts and things that I have saved that I've read over the last couple weeks that I feel are important. And honestly, I feel like at a loss for words, and I've found other people saying what I thought. That's exactly what I'm thinking. And so I'm just going to scroll through here and read to you. This one says, the New Testament vision is of a counterculture. Christians will never become the mainstream culture. Jesus said so. He said that narrow is the path that leads to salvation, and only if you find it. The example of the Middle Ages tells us that the church did not prevail. Rather, the church became perverse. Indeed, all forms of Christian nationalism in history reverse the New Testament vision. Rather than being the mistreated and persecuted people of God, we become the mistreating and persecuting people of God. Christian nationalism always destroys the true faith. To fight against this movement is to fight for the purity of our faith. I'll keep warning about politics for this very reason. This is by Don Green. If Catholics and Mormons are comfortable and have a platform in your movement, let's not pretend that you are making distinct the narrow way of true salvation. Matthew 7:13 and 14. And if your organization holds pastor summits and has a faith initiative, let's also not pretend that you are only an innocent political force with no spiritual agenda. And if you claim to be a biblical Christian and ignore the spiritual implications of these facts and still insist that we are only talking politics after all, you are in grave danger of being willfully blind. What is the gospel? Who is a true Christian? Is the Pope the head of the church? Is Joseph Smith a latter-day prophet? What is the final authority of truth, for truth? Is salvation by grace alone, through faith alone, in Christ alone? Or must we add merit with works and sacraments? You can't sweep these questions under the rug to pinch incense in the emerging civic religion. After all, a curse abides on those who preach a different gospel. Galatians 1:8 and 9. Please wake up, my friends. I am losing sleep over you. Do not believe every spirit, but test the spirits, as you are commanded to do, because many false prophets have gone out into the world. 1 John 4:1. And this is from the Facebook group Christians Exposing Deception. The false light Christianity that is rising, which will eventually unite with the one world religion, will look very close to true Christianity. That's the hook. It has to look close enough to deceive. If the Christianity you are teaching is leading people into the Roman Catholic Church, due to you praising the Pope and Catholicism in general, or into Mormonism, or even false Christian megachurches, then you aren't teaching true biblical Christianity. Let's not forget, Scripture doesn't talk about a massive revival before Christ returns, but a great apostasy, which I believe is going to happen simultaneously. A bait and switch. People will think the world is coming together in unison spiritually when they are really just joining the false rising one world religion. Occultist Benjamin Creme spoke of this huge spiritual revival that would take place before the Maitreya comes. I think this is simply the beginning of that movement. I have seen countless posts of people now joining the Roman Catholic Church and going to Mass, and other Christians saying, praise God about it. Sorry, true Christians don't celebrate when people are lost in the false works-based religion of Catholicism. Also, as I mentioned in my post, TPUSA's teaching materials contain teachings of the Seven Mountain Mandate, which everyone is excited about because now TPUSA is giving them out free. When people get caught up in the emotion of the left versus right paradigm, calling out leftists, their eyes are taken off the true kingdom, which Jesus said, my kingdom is not of this world. Let's not forget discernment isn't knowing the difference between right and wrong, but between right and almost right. And this is something she shared about Benjamin Creme. From Benjamin Creme's writings and lectures, here are key points related to spiritual revival and humanity preparing for Maitreya. A spiritual change is necessary before the public emergence. Creme held that for Maitreya to fully reveal himself, humanity must undergo moral, spiritual, and social changes. He often spoke about a climate of hope and expectancy that needs to be present. For instance, in Maitreya's Mission Volume 2, Krem said, "I believe that a spiritual change in humanity has to take place before Maitreya can appear." And if you didn't know, Maitreya is the New Age Christ, the fifth Buddha, whatever. And here's Charlie Kirk wearing his America, the Golden Age is Upon Us shirt, which I will not buy. This came from David Bass from the Rise channel. He said, trauma-based mind control is a very real phenomenon. Be careful to stay rational when intense emotion is involved. And someone commented, and this was after the memorial service, "Are you seeing what I'm seeing? How they are going to use Christianity to create their perfect beast system? Today was the first time I actually caught a glimpse on how bad the Antichrist deception really was. It's worse than I thought. How they will weaponize Christians against Christians. God help us." And here is Frank Turek. Charlie is not in heaven because he sacrificed his life for Jesus. He is in heaven because Jesus sacrificed his life for Charlie. Amen. That's great. And here is Charlie with Trump and Cheon. And there's Jensen Franklin in the background. And here is Charlie Kirk's pastor, Rob McCoy, with a circle there, with Lance and Hank Kuhneman, Mario Murillo, Gene Bailey, on Flashpoint Live, the Kenneth Copeland production. And here's Charlie with his pastor. And here is a guy named David Lane. He is a Christian national. I took a few notes. He's a Christian nationalist political operative. He started a thing called California Renewal Project, turning congregants into conservative voters. And he had an event called Rediscovering God in America with Rob McCoy, Cheon, Charlie Kirk, etc. You saw that previously. He views politics as spiritual warfare. He says separation of church and state is a lie. Christians must be retrained to war for the soul of America. And he recruits pastors to run for office. And he says he was inspired by Rob McCoy. Lane's Christian Nationalist Organizing, which picks up hotel and meal costs for pastors and spouses who travel to his American Renewal Project events, has been financed in part by the billionaire fracking brothers Ferris and Dan Wilkes, who also fund PragerU. A few years ago, Dan Wilkes bought and renovated a YMCA building for McCoy's church, and the Wilkes family gave thousands to McCoy's failed run for the state legislature in 2014. And here is another headline about Texas Fracking Billionaires Foundation buys church for Christian nationalist pastors in California. And the Wilkes brothers, fracking billionaires of religious right groups, and Koch brothers political network. They fund the Heritage Foundation, the Family Research Council, who also teams up with Cindy Jacobs and people like that. And yeah, so there's that. Here is an excerpt from an article that was, I think, linked in the Exhort and Contend, and I thought I would just read this one section here. McCoy's flagrant blending of electoral politics and religion has served as the inspiration for the American Renewal Project, a group funded by the Wilkes brothers, which holds free conferences for ministers and their spouses to encourage them to emulate McCoy and run for office. According to Kirk, his conversion to Christian nationalism began after he first met McCoy at an event about 2 years ago. This is an older article, so I think this was maybe even 2015 or something like that. He had never heard a pastor talk like what he had heard from McCoy, Kirk told the Westgate Chapel audience. Eventually, Kirk said McCoy pushed him to reconsider whether church and state should really be separated.
In my last video, I discussed how Isaac Newton built the intellectual foundations for Christian Zionism, which is driving American Middle East policy today. And today, I want to explain to you why Christian Zionism is such a powerful force in the world. So here, let me introduce to you the universal law of game theory. Once you master this formula, once you truly understand the ramifications, the nuances, the subtleties of this law, then you will have a much more clear and deeper understanding of how the world works. Okay? And this formula, it's very simple. It goes like this. If you look at game theories, all games, the people who always win the game, they win because of this formula, which is mass times energy times coordination. All right, so mass is just a number of people times energy, which is the level of motivation of these people, times coordination, which is the ability of these people to work together to achieve their end. Some things to keep in mind about this formula. First of all, the different factors are not weighted equally. So coordination is the most important factor, and it's weighted at least 3 times as much as mass. Then you have energy. And energy is what's second most important, and it's weighted twice as much as mass. And depending on the game, the weightings can be different. But please keep this in mind. Coordination is what really matters, followed by energy, followed ultimately by mass. So if I explain that, let me explain to you what each term means and how we can measure each factor to get a more mathematical understanding of this formula. Mass is just the number of people involved, but what's important to measure is their cohesion, how much they like each other, how much they're willing to work together. So, for example, you look at Japan and China. Japan is a much more cohesive society than China. So in terms of mass, Japan is actually stronger than China, even though China has 10 times or 5 times as many people as Japan. Then you look at energy. Energy is the level of motivation. And usually when we think of energy, we think of physical energy. But actually, in this formula, it's mental energy that really matters. Because if you think about it, it's mental energy that is the most expensive. And so you need the most amount of motivation in order to achieve mental energy. So let me give you an example of this. Let's just say there are 2 people. The first person, he's digging a hole in the ground for 12 hours a day for a whole year. Then you have another person who every day is seeking to improve himself. So he's constantly in the process of self-reflection, writing down the ways that he can improve, and creating a strategy, a formula for how he can improve himself. Well, according to this formula, the second person is expending much more energy than the first person, even though if we just look at it, it seems like it's the first person that's doing all the work, and the second person just sitting around all day just thinking. And the reason why is, in the world, the 3 hardest words to say for a human being is, I am wrong. To say I'm wrong is to negate yourself, to negate your ego, to admit that you have failings. To say you are wrong is also to commit to a policy of self-improvement, self-change. It's also a tremendous loss of face to say I'm wrong before your peers. You lower your status, you lose face. And that's why people who are more energetic, who are more motivated, they are much more open to change. They're much more willing to accept their limitations. They're much more willing to commit to self-improvement. So energy is a measure of motivation, and we can measure motivation by a group's openness to accepting its limitations, its failings. Okay, so that's the idea of energy. Then the third aspect of this formula is the idea of coordination. And coordination can be divided into two different types. The first type is conscious coordination. Second type is subconscious coordination. Conscious coordination is when you're led by someone. It could be a leader, it could be a bureaucracy, it could be a patriarch. Subconscious coordination is when there's no clear leader or clear direction, people just subconsciously work together. It's almost like a dance. And of the two, subconscious coordination is the more powerful. When people get together and they sort of conspire together, that leads to all sorts of problems. You don't want conspiracy. You don't want open conspiracies. So let me explain to you why open conspiracies or secret conspiracies are bad policy. Okay? The first reason is it's really hard to maintain the secrecy of a conspiracy. Eventually, word's going to leak out that these people are conspiring together. And if word leaks out that these people are conspiring together, that forces other people to conspire together in this game. So if you are conspiring together, you have to keep it secret in order to maintain your advantage, but it's very, very hard to keep it secret. In fact, you probably waste more time and energy keeping it secret than you do in actually trying to implement your conspiracy. Okay, so that's the first reason why conspiracies are not a good idea. Second reason is, in most games, conspiracies are illegal. It's considered cheating. So you lose possible deniability when you are conspiring together and when you're keeping notes and when you're meeting in a room together and plotting together. The third reason is the most important. Okay, the third reason why you don't want to conspire together is everyone has an ego. Everyone is trying to maximize his or her self-interest in a conspiracy. And that immediately leads to friction, conflict, debate. So this creates friction in the relationship. So subconscious coordination is much more powerful than conscious coordination. It allows for frictionless cooperation and allows for plausible deniability and allows for secrecy. So examples of subconscious coordination are families, ethnicities, religions, okay? So having said that, okay, having presented this formula, mass times energy times coordination, so now I want to discuss how to maximize this formula. Remember, the trick is how do you create subconscious coordination in your team? And believe it or not, the answer is you have a really powerful story. A powerful story, it's a way to frame your understanding of the world, and it's also a script. It allows you to understand how to behave in a certain context. All right, so let me explain to you the power of a story. All right, let's do a thought experiment first. Let's imagine that we have the power to present every single story in human history to every single person who's ever lived and who's still alive today. And the stories we present include Star Wars, Lord of the Rings, Disney movies, Homer, the Iliad, the Bible. Every single story that humans have ever produced is presented to every single person. And then 10 years from now, we talk to every single person again and figure out what story that person most remembered and tabulate the results. When we do so, then what we will discover is that most people will have remembered 3 stories. Okay? The first story is Plato's allegory of the cave. The second story is the crucifixion and resurrection of Jesus. The third story is the second coming of Jesus. Okay? So let me explain all 3 stories. Okay, so Plato's allegory of the cave, it's interesting because it's really Plato's reimagining of the trial of Socrates. For him, his mentor Socrates, who was forced to drink hemlock by Athenians for the crime of corrupting the youth of Athens, for Plato, Socrates was this truth teller who discovered the truth of the world through philosophy. And he committed himself to revealing this truth to the Athenian people. And in response, the Athenian people condemned him to death because, as I mentioned previously, no one likes to say, I'm wrong. And no one likes to be told they're wrong. The second story, the crucifixion and resurrection of Jesus, it's interesting because it is actually a reimagining of Plato's allegory of the cave, because Jesus was this truth teller sent by God to earth to reveal the truth of the universe to people. In response, we killed Jesus. Okay, so the allegory of the cave and the crucifixion of Jesus, it's really just one story. Second coming of Jesus is really compelling because it's marking the end of history. It's telling us when everything will come to an end and when we will have achieved paradise and reconciliation with God. So these 3 stories that are most memorable, it's really just one story. And it's appealing to us because as humans, we're born with 3 questions embedded in our hearts, in our soul. The first question is, where do we come from? Second question is, why are we here? Third question is, where are we going? And the power of these 3 stories, Plato's allegory of the cave, the crucifixion of Jesus, the second coming of Jesus, it's really helping us answer all 3 questions in a compelling and convincing manner. And that's why Christian Zionism is so powerful, because it's the most powerful story out there. That's why there's so many Christians. That's why Christian Zionists are the most energetic, the most motivated, the most committed people that you can ever meet. And again, the story, it is really a script. As a Christian Zionist, you want to achieve this story. It is so compelling, so powerful to you as a person. In fact, you're willing to sacrifice your own life in order to achieve this story. That's how beautiful it is. And that explains to us, that helps us understand why Christian Zionism is the most powerful force in the world today. Because for the people who believe in Christian Zionism, they feel as though they discovered the secret of the universe, and they must bring this story into fruition, into reality. Now, next thing I want to talk about is, if it is true that this story, the crucifixion of Jesus and the second coming, is such a powerful story, then in theory, we should have seen the story. We should have seen people try to achieve the story before, and also it's telling us that the story, Christian Zionism, will never ever go away. it will continue until the end of human history. So what I will do now is tell you that actually 1,500 years ago, they also tried to achieve the completion of the story. So 1,500 years ago, about 600 Common Era, there was this massive war going on between the two major powers of that age. The Byzantine Empire, based in Constantinople, and then you have the Sasanian Persian Empire. And this war just devastated the entire world. People were dying, people were starving, people were in debt, people were in slavery, there was religious persecution. It really felt like the end times, the end of days. Also at this time, the Jews were banned from Jerusalem, which is their holy city. It's the city of their God, Yahweh. And so the Jews in the diaspora were plotting throughout all this time how to return to Jerusalem. They were kicked out of Jerusalem because many centuries before, they had fought 3 major rebellions against the Roman Empire. And in each time, the Jews lost because we're fighting the Roman Empire. And each time, the Jews went to the desert of Arabia. Why did these armies, these defeated armies, go into the desert of Arabia? Because the Romans really hated sand. They could only be safe in the desert of Arabia. And when they went to the desert of Arabia, they went there with commitment to eventually reclaim Jerusalem, to wait for the arrival of the Messiah to lead them to final victory against the Romans. And while they were in the desert of Arabia, they were interacting with the local Arab pagans. And in this interaction, there's a process of syncretization, where Jewish belief was being meshed into Arab pagan belief. But as I told you, the most compelling story always wins out. So eventually, the Jewish belief that the Messiah would eventually come to create the Messianic age of truth, justice. Eventually, it won over the Arab people. And this would become the foundation for the modern belief of Islam. And so during this time, there's a widespread belief in the Arabian desert that a Messiah will eventually come to unite the Jewish people and lead them into final victory against the Roman Empire, which at this time had now become the Byzantine Empire. Back in the Jewish diaspora, they were trying to figure out how to return to Jerusalem. One group in the Jewish diaspora allied themselves with the Persians, who promised them that they would, like Cyrus the Great, take them back to Jerusalem and build the third temple for them. And at first they succeeded. The Persians were able to conquer Jerusalem, and the Jews were able to reclaim the city for themselves. And they were now in the process of building the third temple. The problem, though, is that at this time in history, the majority of the population were actually Christian. So the Christians rebelled against the Jews, and then the Christians called for help to the Byzantine Empire. At this time, a new general, Heraclius, had emerged, and he had usurped the throne from the emperor. And so now the new emperor, Heraclius, he has a legitimacy problem. And so he decided, like, the best way to prove that he in fact has the mandate of heaven, that he has the will of God supporting him, he decides that he has to reclaim Jerusalem and basically massacre all the Jews. So at this time in history, it seemed all hope was lost. Jews were being massacred. It seemed as though the Antichrist, Heraclius, has emerged to destroy the Jewish nation. Now, the funny thing about Jewish eschatology is that when all hope seems lost, when the Antichrist has emerged, when the Jewish nation is about to be completely destroyed, that's when Jewish people are most convinced the Jewish Messiah will emerge to lead them into war and into the final victory against the Antichrist and usher in the Messianic age, where they will reconstitute the nation of Israel, bring everyone home from the Jewish diaspora, build a third temple, and create a millennium of peace, truth, and justice. So the Jews go into the Arabian desert, and now they're looking for their Messiah, the promised Messiah. And there are different candidates, but ultimately they settle on one charismatic man who is absolutely convinced that he is in fact the Jewish Messiah. We don't know his name, okay? A lot of his biography has been lost to us over the course of history, but today we refer to him as Muhammad. Okay? Muhammad was the Jewish Messiah. And the Jews were looking to him to lead them into final victory against the Byzantines and the Antichrist, Heraclius. and he took up the call. And according to game theory, all he had to do was say 3 things, and he would unite the entire world behind him. And once he did so, he would become a tidal wave to wash over the old order and build the Messianic age. All he had to do was say 3 things, okay? The first thing he had to say was, I am the Jewish Messiah. I'm the fulfillment of the prophecy. I am the promised one. I'm the anointed one. Okay, that's the first thing. Second thing he needed to say is that we are all the children of Abraham. Jews, Christians, Muslims, we are all descended from Abraham. And as such, we are all the children of God. And as such, this land was promised to us by God, and therefore debt, slavery, landlessness, it's all evil in the eyes of God. And therefore, we must create a revolution to ensure that everyone has land, that debt is canceled, that slavery is eliminated from this world. So that's why I'm here. I'm the Messiah to lead us to final victory in the pursuit of the Messianic age. And the third thing that Muhammad had to say in order to unite the world is, all these religious differences are idiotic. Zoroastrianism, Catholic Christianity, Nestorian Christianity, Orthodox Christianity, Judaism. It does not, these factions are against the will of God. We are all the children of God, and therefore we can all celebrate God in our own way. These factions, these divisions only exist for the priest class to exploit us, for the emperor, for the political class to unite, to divide and conquer us. Okay, so you are free to celebrate your religion. You're free to celebrate God, your faith, in any way you seem fit. Okay, and this is what eventually led to something called the Constitution of Medina, where one of the founding ideologies of Islam is religious tolerance. You are free to practice your faith in any way. You're free to love God in any way. And because he said these 3 things, Muhammad would lead the world's first global revolution against the established order, and thus creating the basic structure of Islam. Unfortunately, Muhammad died before he could complete his mission, but that didn't stop many Jews from believing that he was in fact the Jewish Messiah, because in their eyes, the prophecy has been fulfilled. First of all, the Arabs were able to reconquer Jerusalem and return the Jews to Jerusalem, thus reconstituting the nation of Israel. Second of all, they built the third temple. Today we call it the Al-Aqsa Mosque. It's still there in Jerusalem, you can still visit it, but back then they thought it was the third temple. And the third thing is, they did usher in a millennium of peace, prosperity, truth, justice. Today we call it the Islamic Golden Age. Okay, so for many Jews, the prophecy had been fulfilled, and that's why many Jews converted to Islam during this process. And many Jews would emerge as the top administrators, the top officials of the Islamic Golden Age, making tremendous contributions to world civilization in the process. Unfortunately, what we also know about this period is that the early followers of Muhammad, called the companions, they were all basically eliminated in the power struggle that emerged after the death of Muhammad. Okay, so I know that for many of you, this is extremely controversial history, and I don't have enough time to go into the specific details. So what I will do is, in the description below, I'm going to link a really awesome paper written by 2 Jewish religious historians about this time, so you can have a better understanding of how Muhammad really is the Jewish Messiah. I'm also going to link to have a lot of wiki links, so you can do some more background research into this period. It's really fascinating, and I apologize I don't have enough time to go into more details about this period. Okay, so to summarize, according to game theory, the universal law of game theory, Christian Zionists will emerge as dominant power in the Middle East. They're the ones driving US policy right now. They will eventually overwhelm both the American empire and the global financial elite. They will force the United States to send in ground troops and invade Iran in order to implement regime change. And they will basically get whatever they want. So it seems as though we figured out history. It seems we're able to predict the future by using game theory properly and systematically. And honestly, we're able to have a very clear insight into the trajectory of history. The problem, though, is game theory is not that easy. Okay? Why? Because according to game theory, when it seems like they structure the game, when there seems to be a trajectory, when the players are obvious in their moves, when there's certain inevitability to the decision-making of certain players, what will happen is a new player will emerge who see the contours of the game being played, and he will manipulate events and change the course of this game to benefit himself and his group. Okay? Now, Hegel's name for this person, this player, is the world historical figure. Nietzsche's name for this player is the Ubermensch, the Superman, the person who's able to step outside of history and control the reins of history in order to achieve his own ends. And by doing so, he's able to forever change the course of human history. Now, according to game theory, now that the game, the structure of the game has is pretty clear, the Ubermensch will now emerge. And in fact, today we do have the Ubermensch. And this Ubermensch will manipulate the game in order to achieve his vision. And he will forever change the course of human history. And this person's name is Vladimir Putin. So in my next video, I'm going to discuss who Vladimir Putin really is, what he wants, and how he will achieve his vision. So thank you for today. I hope you enjoyed the talk, and I'll continue the talk next week. Also, some of you in the comment section have been telling me how much you want to support my work, and I'm really grateful for it, and I would really appreciate your support. So you don't have to do it. I'm committed to educating you for free. You don't have to pay me anything. You don't have to give me anything. But I would really appreciate it if you have the means to buy me a coffee. Okay. So thanks a lot, and I will see everyone next time.
Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of the podcast. You know, over the years I've talked a lot about Nicole Kidman and Tom Cruise and Eyes Wide Shut. A lot. And I have talked about Nicole Kidman's dad. And in the wake of all the Keith Urban Nicole stuff, it obviously bubbles back up in my mind. And Nicole Kidman's father, Dr. Anthony Kidman, died back in September of 2014. He died after a quote-unquote fall in Singapore, where he was visiting his younger daughter Antonia and her children. Now, there also have been rumors over the years that Antonia is the one that carried Sunday Rose, Nicole's first child with Keith Urban. But Dr. Anthony Kidman is visiting. He's not at his home, and that's important for later on. And Singapore police said they were investigating the unnatural death of a man, but did not give his name. Police were informed today at about 9:54 local time that a man in his 80s was pronounced dead at Tan Tock Seng Hospital, according to a police spokesperson from Singapore. And they added that police are investigating the unnatural death. Now, Dr. Kidman was a respected clinical psychologist and researcher who had worked with the University of Technology's Health Psychology Unit at Royal North Shore Hospital in Sydney. He was an academic in the study of the brain and nervous system and had been carrying out scientific research and lecturing for more than 30 years. It's with great sadness that we learned of Dr. Tony Kidman's sudden passing. During his 43 years at the University of Technology, Tony has contributed greatly as a colleague, as a researcher, and as a health practitioner. Tony will be missed by all at UTS. Our thoughts are with his family at this time. One of his key areas of interest was the mental health issues of young Australians, in particular psychosis, bullying, and stress. So he worked with teens, young people, young adults, authored several publications dealing with anxiety and depression. Okay, now, in the wake of that, Fiona Barnett, and you can take her with a grain of salt, you can believe everything she says, but she has had her work published, and let's just see what she said. Whether or not you believe it or not, let's just go over it. She said, on White Balloon Day, September 7th, 2014, an event meaningful to me because it raises awareness for assault victims, the main perpetrator of my abuse, Anthony Kidman, died suddenly in Singapore at his funeral. And Kidman was, this is her words, I allege, part of a Sydney-based ring of which I was a victim until the age of 15. And what is undisputed is at the time of his death, Kidman was under investigation by a Healthcare Complaints Commission, the Psychology Council Commission, presumably the Royal Commission into Institutional Responses, as well as the police. And since 1986, I have reported Kidman's crimes to health professionals, none of whom adhered to mandatory reporting legislation until 2008. In 2008, I reported Kidman's involvement in this ring to the New South Wales Police, specifically Justin Hadley. In 2013, I formally reported Kidman to the Royal Commission at a private hearing in Brisbane. Later in 2013, I made an application to the New South Wales Victims of Crime naming Kidman and other perpetrators. And then on August 7, 2014, at the suggestion of my New South Wales Victims of Crime appointed psychologist, I notified against Kidman to the Australia Health Practitioners Regulation Agency. And they notified me they were investigating my complaint against Kidman. And just over a month later, he died. Okay. Now, 7 months later, just 7 months later, a guy named Angus Hawley died under very mysterious circumstances. 7 months later, while on a trip to New York. Again, a trip. And you probably don't recognize the name Angus Hawley. But Angus Hawley was Nicole Kidman's former brother-in-law. Married to Antonio Kidman for 11 years. Died while on a business trip to New York on April 25th, 2015. A mystery still surrounds the late-night death. The New York City Office of Chief Medical Examiner said the cause of death is undetermined. The manner of death is undetermined. And the sudden death of one of Sydney's society princes attracted much public interest, but the findings of his autopsy have never been released. A Freedom of Information request by Fairfax Media to access the autopsy's findings was denied. And then an appeal against this decision was also denied by the New York Office of Chief Medical Examiner in the interest of preserving the privacy of the family. They said the information requested would constitute an unwarranted invasion of privacy. And while the Freedom of Information law does not contain a specific exemption for autopsy reports, its intention to protect reasonable privacy interests is clear. And that surviving relatives have an interest in keeping private the affairs of the dead. But the decision to withhold the details surrounding Hawley's death was described as very odd by Sean O'Driscoll, a U.S. attorney based in New York, and a journalist with the Irish edition of the Times. And he regularly works with American authorities in obtaining autopsy details, most recently accessing the full report into the death of Jim Carrey's ex-girlfriend, Katrina White. And Mr. O'Driscoll thought it unusual the only detail released in the case is the cause of death was undetermined. That doesn't tell anybody anything. The whole point of releasing this information is to determine the cause of death and to see if there are trends. For example, is there a drug problem? Is there a problem with heart disease and so on? That kind of information should be publicly accessible. But they were stalling, because if they don't give out the toxicology report, then there's basically no knowledge coming out at all. Now, Hawley was a former Scots College student and business development manager at Valor Private Wealth, was said to be in great health when he traveled to the U.S. with investor friends to attend a talk by Warren Buffett on wealth accumulation. He was a fitness fanatic. He enjoyed a daily freshwater swim at Bondi Icebergs, had been out to dinner with a group of friends after a workout session on Saturday evening. He retired early for the night to the Brooklyn home he had rented with a handful of his friends about 10 p.m. When they came home about 1 a.m., Mr. Hawley had collapsed on the floor. His older brother said in a statement at the time that Mr. Hawley had suddenly and very unexpectedly died of a suspected heart attack. A great-grandson of Grace Brothers retailer and store founder Albert Grace, the one-time close friend and brother-in-law of Tom Cruise, was a regular on the social circuit, often seen at VIP events and film premieres, even attending the Golden Globes in 2003, on the arm of Antonio Kidman and his sister-in-law Nicole, who took home the Best Actress award that night for The Hours. Antonio and Hawley had 4 children together, but tabloid magazine allegations of an extramarital affair with the mother of their eldest daughter's friend rocked their marriage, and they split in 2007 shortly after their youngest daughter was born in March of that year. Debbie Phillips was the name of the woman. Her daughter was best friends with Antonio Kidman's. She said she had a 5-month secret affair with Antonio's husband, Angus Hawley. The first time Angus Hawley kissed Debbie Phillips, she tried to resist. There were so many reasons why an affair shouldn't happen. He was the father of her 9-year-old daughter, Cassie's best friend. She knew and liked his wife, TV presenter Antonio Kidman. And she was worried that Angus had recently been treated for anxiety and depression at an exclusive Sydney clinic. Isn't that the same thing that his father-in-law dealt with? Interesting. But the boyish 38-year-old businessman swept aside her scruples on their first official date when he picked her up in a stretch limo stocked with vodka and ice and took her to watch rugby on television at a friend's apartment. He snuggled up on the lounge and kissed me, recalls former model Debbie, who was once the face and hair of a shampoo company. I actually stopped him short and said I didn't want that. It wasn't right. I told him I didn't want to be the rebound girl he turned to because his marriage to Antonio was in trouble. I told him I wasn't a casual fling kind of person, and that's why it was so serious to me. But he was holding me and seducing me, and it was quite an intoxicating moment. A month later, on the advice of his late former father-in-law, clinical psychologist Anthony Kidman, Hawley sought help at the Sydney Clinic in Bronte, which treats patients for acute and general psychiatry, mood disorders, and alcohol and other drug addictions. At the time, Antonio Kidman said he was seeking help to deal with anxiety and depression. But in 2009, Hawley confirmed to Women's Day his long battle with substance abuse, which he said contributed to his marriage breakdown. I was depressed, out of control, and full of self-loathing, and I resorted to drugs to get through it. I might not take any drugs for 3 weeks, then there would be a week where I was hitting it every day. Kind of sounds like the same relationship that Nicole Kidman had with Keith Urban. At its worst, I didn't want to be alive. Of course, it affected my marriage. I was very inconsistent, and I wasn't in control, so I would often retreat. He added that counseling and support from family and friends helped him break his addiction, but he remained wary of a relapse, just like Keith Urban. I'm not drawn to it anymore, but I'm in recovery, so you can never say never. I'm really pleased with where I'm at. I've got very stringent measures in place for it to not happen again. And 5 months after he moved out of the home he shared with Antonio Kidman and their children, he started dating Prue Fisher, a nanny, who was once interviewed by Antonio Kidman to take care of the 4 Hawley children. Mr. Hawley and Miss Fisher, the owner of Paddington fashion boutique Come As You Are, married at a private Palm Beach home in March 2011. The 32-year-old was the chief mourner along with her 4 stepchildren, Mr. Hawley's private memorial, held at the mansion of his childhood friend, Justin Hems. At a more public second memorial held at a zoo's bird sanctuary overlooking the Sydney Opera House, she was described as the love of his life in a eulogy by his brother, David Hawley. Antonio Kidman married a guy, Singapore-based businessman, which is why the dad was going to visit her in Singapore. They had 2 children together. Antonio wouldn't give any kind of statement about the death of the father of 4 of her 6 kids. And Prue Hawley also didn't respond. I just find it very interesting that 7 months apart, 2 people who were once related, who have these psychological issues, who've been accused, one of them at least, of some very horrible crimes, end up dead under very mysterious circumstances that have still yet to be explained 10 years later. Okay, you guys, that is it for this one. I will talk to you later.
There are 3 things that you may not know about Isaac Newton. And once I explain these 3 things, then you have a much more complete understanding of this brilliant man. The first thing that you probably don't know about him is that he was fascinated by the occult. He was a major practitioner of the occult, mainly alchemy. Newton spent most of his life in search of the Philosopher's Stone, because the Philosopher's Stone promised the elixir of immortality, which would grant immortality. It also promised to turn lead into gold. And Newton was positive that it existed, so he spent most of his life in search of it. And we know about this because in the 1930s, the economist John Maynard Keynes, he bought Newton's papers on an auction, and he really believed that within these papers he would discover mathematical secrets of the universe. Instead, what he discovered was all this religious gibberish from Newton. Newton spent most of his life studying the Bible, trying to figure out the divine messages embedded in the Bible. So if you were to ask Newton, like, what is your profession? Newton would never say he was a scientist or a philosopher. He would say, first and foremost, he was a theologian. He was most interested in discovering the mind of God. And that's why he developed his mathematical and physical systems, in order to better decipher the mind of God. Okay, so let me give you an example of this. At this time in history, most Christians understood that history was teleological. Teleological comes from the Greek telos, which means purpose. So history is moving towards the end, which is the second coming of Christ. Newton's great insight was to understand that if history is indeed teleological, then it has structure and order, and therefore it can be expressed mathematically. And so if you can figure out the mathematical underpinnings of the world, then you've proven that history is teleological, and therefore you've proven that God exists. Newton's 3 laws of motions, right? Let's summarize Newton's 3 laws of motions. Law number 1, things that are at rest stay at rest. Number 2, force equals mass times acceleration. Number 3, for every action, there must be an equal reaction. Okay? So what people don't understand is these 3 laws are not physical laws. They are first and foremost an ontological argument, which proves the existence of God. So the first law, things that are at rest must stay at rest. Okay, so we can imagine that at the beginning of time, everything was at rest. If everything's at rest, it can't move by itself, according to the first law. Therefore, something must have moved things to put things in motion. And this is what Aristotle calls the prime mover. Second and third law implies that there's a structure and order and purpose to the universe. And who designed this structure, order, and purpose? It must be God. Okay? So what's interesting is that these 3 laws of motion, they prove that God exists, but much more importantly, they are the basis for a new religion, a new religious movement called deism. And deism is important because deism is the main religion of the founding fathers of America. Okay? So having proven that God in fact does exist, Newton's next step is, what does God want? What is God's purpose? Well, for him, it was easy. To understand God's purpose, read the Bible. So Newton would spend decades reading the Bible and trying to imagine its mathematical underpinnings. For him, every sentence was a mathematical formula. And he was trying to take the Bible and compare and contrast it with history. And he wrote a book. It was not published in his lifetime, but it was published after his death. It was called Observations upon the Prophecies of Daniel and the Apocalypse of St. John. And it's something you have to look at, okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a link down in the description below, which will, and you can read it online for free, okay? So this is a major work, and it's a foundational text for Christian Zionism because it argues, first of all, that history is teleological, that God has a purpose. And second of all, and this is really important, The Bible is literal, okay? So even though Daniel and John were different people, they both, as prophets, spoke the mind of God. They were divinely inspired. There are three things that you may not know about Isaac Newton. And once I explain these three things, then having proven that God in fact does exist, Newton's next step is, what does God want? What is God's purpose? Well, for him, it was easy. First of all, that history is theological, that God has a purpose. And second of all, this is really important, the Bible is literal, okay? So even though Daniel and John were different people, they both, as prophets, spoke the mind of God. They were divinely inspired, and so whatever they wrote came from God himself. So by examining their prophecies, you are deciphering God's purpose for humanity, okay? And this is the foundation for Christian Zionism, okay? So that's the first thing you need to understand about Newton, that he was, first and foremost, a theologian and not a scientist, okay? Second thing that you must understand about Newton is that he was a member of secret societies in England at that time. Now, today when we think of secret societies, we think of nefarious underground conspiracies. But at that time, secret societies were actually very common and very well accepted. Secret societies were platforms for men of education, of wealth, and of status to get together to engage in religious speculation outside the purview of the Anglican Church. At that time, the Anglican Church had an orthodoxy, and by law, you could not transgress against this orthodoxy. So for example, Newton got into a lot of trouble during his lifetime because he did not believe in the Holy Trinity. He thought that Jesus was not co-equal to God. He thought that Jesus was subordinate to God. And this was a heresy at that time. So Newton got in a lot of trouble, but he had powerful friends, powerful backers, and so they bailed him out from the church authorities. These secret societies were a platform for people to discuss religious matters. They also had their origins from the Knights Templars. The Knights Templars during the Crusades were in Jerusalem, and because they were in Jerusalem, they could engage in world religions like Zoroastrianism, like Islam, like Judaism, like paganism. And as such, and because these were extremely well-educated men with deep intellectual curiosity, they collected all the secret teachings that they were exposed to in Jerusalem, and they brought it back to them in Europe. And so they ran afoul of the Catholic Church, which outlawed them eventually. But their teachings went underground, and they became embedded in these secret societies. Okay? So when Newton joined these secret societies, and when he was able to discover the laws of the universe, well, I imagine that these men celebrate Newton as a prophet, as a messiah, as a chosen one, as someone who would reveal the secret teachings of God to the world. And because the world was not ready for these teachings, then they would make it their mission to keep it secret and wait for the day when they could reveal these teachings to the world. Newton's teachings that God has a purpose, and this purpose is literally embedded into the Bible, and this purpose will lead to the second coming of Christ. It now becomes the framework for these secret societies. And as they spread to America, it becomes embedded in the secret societies of America as well. And guess who were members of these secret societies? The founding fathers of America, right? So that's something you need to know about Newton, that he was a member of these secret societies who celebrated him and who treated his theological understandings as the Word of God. Okay? And the third thing that you have to understand about Newton is for 30 years, he was master of the royal mint. His purpose was to maintain the sanctity, the value, and the credibility of royal coinage against counterfeiters. And so to deal with counterfeiters, he set up a network of spies to identify these counterfeiters, sometimes to torture them for information, and for the most egregious offenders, they would be executed. Okay? So in other words, Newton established England's very first intelligence agency, intelligence apparatus. In 1865, the United States Treasury Department established a Secret Service. What's their job? Their job was to identify counterfeiters. Why were they called the Secret Service? Because the Treasury Department didn't want people to know they existed. Because if they existed, it meant that counterfeiting was a huge problem in America, which it was at that time, which it still is today. And so that would undermine the credibility of the currency. Okay, so Newton had his own intelligence agency. So in many ways, Newton built the foundations of the British Empire, which eventually became the Anglo-American Empire, which controls the world today. And so let's summarize, and I'll give you 3 takeaways from today's talk I want you to remember, okay? The first takeaway is, because Isaac Newton saw himself as a prophet, because he was convinced that only through divine favor could he arise from being a poor, abandoned child to becoming one of the leading intellectuals of British society, the leading scientist of British society. It could only be through divine favor. Then he had a mission to spread God's message. And that message will become the foundations of Christian Zionism. So Christian Zionism is embedded into the very fabric, the very foundation of the Anglo-American Empire. Okay, that's the first major takeaway. Second major takeaway is Israel is a creation of the Anglo-American Empire. Zionism is a creation of Christian Zionism, which leads us to the third takeaway. Judaism and Zionism are not the same thing. Christian Zionism and Judaism are in fundamental conflict. Let me explain why. The people who are most opposed to the creation of the state of Israel are Orthodox Jews, because in their tradition, in their religion, the plan is for God to send a Messiah, the anointed one, who will lead the Jewish people. And this Messiah will bring the Jews back to the Promised Land, create the nation of Israel, build the third temple, and create the Messianic age. Okay? The Jews don't know who this Messiah is, and they don't know when he will come, and so they must be patient and have faith in God. Christian Zionism is an attempt to manipulate history, manipulate God, to force the second coming of Jesus. In the mind of Christian Zionists, if the nation of Israel is reconstituted, if all the Jews return to Israel, if the third temple is built, if there's a war of Gog and Magog, then Jesus is forced to return. They will force the hand of God and create the Messianic age. So for Orthodox Jews, this is a blasphemy. This is counterfeiting. This is stealing their religion. And that's why Orthodox Jews are most opposed to the state of Israel. So I know this was an extremely controversial, very confusing talk. So what I'll do again is I will, in the description below, put all the links and the references you will need to truly understand Christian Zionism. So please look at Newton's book, Observations upon the Prophecies of Daniel and the Apocalypse of St. John. Please look at the Scofield Bible, which frames the Bible in the lens of Christian Zionism. And please look at wiki entries for Christian Zionism, premillennial dispensationalism, Newton. Okay, so if you really want to understand what's going on in the Middle East, then you really need to get a good handle on these ideas. I'm sure this talk has raised a lot of questions for you. Some of you are like, why is Christian Zionism so powerful? Some of you may disagree and say, what's driving this war in the Middle East is not Christian Zionism, it's international finance, it's the City of London, it's the Great Reset, it's American Empire, okay? So what I will do in my next talk is explain to you, these things are not mutually exclusive. They're all one thing. And you can make the argument that they are one big conspiracy. And the only people who don't know that this is a great conspiracy are the conspirators themselves, okay? In my next talk, I will use game theory to explain to you what's going on. And when I do, then things will be extremely clear to you as to why Christian Zionism is able to drive the history of the Middle East, okay? What I'll also show you next in my next talk is that Christian Zionism, what's happening in the Middle East, it's happened before and it will happen again, okay? So 1,500 years ago in the Middle East, it seemed as though biblical prophecy was about to be fulfilled. The world was at war against each other. Empires were fighting over Jerusalem, and millions were dying. The world seemed to be ending. It really seemed the end of history. And at this time, the Jews were praying for the Messiah. And they really believed the Messiah had come to them. Okay, a man came, and they really believed he was the anointed one. And he was able to rally not just the Jews, but everyone around him. He was so charismatic. And it really seemed as though the Messianic age would come. And these Jews were willing to die for him. That's how much they believed in him. This man's name, well, actually, we don't know this man's name. But today, we refer to this man as Muhammad, okay? Muhammad was the Messiah of the Jews. So in my next video, I will explain to you how this came about. Just a quick announcement. I want to thank everyone for subscribing to my channel. I'm really flattered by all the attention, but I'm not really set up for this. This summer, I brought my 2 kids back to Toronto, and I'm every day I'm from like 8 a.m. until 4 p.m. I take them outside to play. So I really don't have that much time to make these videos. But at the same time, I want to do the best possible job in presenting really interesting perspectives to you about what's going on in the world today. If you spend the time to watch my videos, then I have an obligation to make sure these videos are insightful for you. So I'm gonna need more time to spend on these videos. Okay, so thanks so much for watching. I really appreciate it, and I will see you next time.
What are you smoking? Rum and maple. Yeah, I think this is going to be a little closer. All right. Rum and maple, we're going now. This is probably how we'll start, because I like to keep things very informal, whether I'm talking to President Harry Truman, which I did at one time, or to anybody else. Where does...
Well, you can't have much of a fight over rum and maple.
Oh, yes, I can, because that is very acrid-smelling stuff. Are you sure you don't have a little pot in there?
That's the last thing, and I don't even drink.
Yeah, I smoked rum and maple when I was an adolescent, as a matter of fact, and I offended a lot of people. But I think you probably offend me more with what you have to say than with that pipe.
I didn't come here to make love.
You know, on the Pacifica radio stations, a fair question is, where does free speech end? Does it end with someone shouting fire in a crowded theater?
Well, I'm so sick of hearing that analogy. I wish somebody would invent a new one.
The next one I was about to bring up, does it end by allowing a colloquy to be broadcast between George Lincoln Rockwell and, say, myself?
Well, I would say this. I believe in free speech, regardless of what people have been told. I believe in free speech a hell of a lot more than most conservatives, for instance. I think that the communists, for instance, should be allowed to preach their doctrines. I think where free speech ends is when conspiracy begins. When criminal activity begins, then it is no longer speech. And in my opinion, the communist movement is a criminal conspiracy and has been so labeled by the government. Not that I'm red hot for the government, but I'm just saying, in other words, it's not just George Lincoln Rockwell that says it's a conspiracy. The government says so too. I think that in a state in which we had supremacy and had the government power, I would permit total free speech. I would permit a man to say, I'm a communist. I advocate the communist principles, and I would thereupon insist on debating a gentleman and putting him down. I believe I could. In other words, I think ideas should be free to be expressed by everybody and should compete together. I do not think anybody should have the right to get a club or use the more subtle means of conspiracy to put over ideas on unwilling people.
The analogy I made was like gilding the lily now, because that man was and is George Lincoln Rockwell. George Lincoln Rockwell, do you prefer to be called Commander?
Well, in my own group, of course, I am always referred to as Commander. In colloquies such as this, I am called a lot of other names, and you're welcome to use any ones you like here. I'm not going to ask for any special favors.
Pacifica has virtually no restrictions on speech, and I might say the quid pro quo goes for you.
Fire away.
Marshal Key, one of the leading allies of the United States government today, has stated that one of his greatest heroes is Adolf Hitler. How about you?
Well, I'm sure my position is too well known for me to have to reiterate it. My position is the same, exactly the same, and I think the reason Mr. Key said that isn't because he's a vile monster or a beast or any kind of, even a fascist, perhaps. He simply said it because Adolf Hitler was a great leader. Let's even say, arguendo, that Adolf Hitler was a bad man. You've got to give him credit, at least, for being a great organizer of human beings. He did do this. And this is what Mr. Key's problem is. He has a tremendous job of organizing chaos. And in that position, he said he needed somebody like Adolf Hitler. And in fact, about 5 of them, I think, is what he said.
In one of your essays, you decry conditions in Vietnam. Why?
Well, I decry the fact that we're in there at all. Douglas MacArthur said, and I think any American with any sense ought to see, that we have no business being in there at all. Asia is a yellow continent. I think it should be ruled and run and dominated by yellow people. We have no business getting mixed up in their business whatsoever. However, once we have made the terrible mistake of getting in there and committing ourselves, I think that it is intolerable that we should abandon the men who have died there without victory. I think we absolutely must win. If were I the President of the United States, Vietnam isn't the size of Connecticut, and South Vietnam is half of it. I would send over Chesty Puller and some of the Marine and Navy and Army and generals that I know and admirals, and have that place whipped in a matter of about 3 days.
You're talking about using nuclear weapons.
I don't think you have to go that far. I think that, for instance, guerrilla warfare can be easily put down, even without fatal gases, with nerve gases that would simply put an end to any more combat in the whole area. Just completely stop it. If necessary to use atomic weapons, I would use them, but I think Vietnam is too small. I think that the Marine Corps, all by itself, allowed to fight. I mean, really allowed to fight, the old-fashioned way, the way we were taught to fight the Japs and the Germans and the fascists and so forth when I was out fighting them. If they were allowed to fight, I believe they could whip that place into line in a couple of weeks.
The Vietnam essay in one of your tomes, the Rockwell Report, is one of a number of publications of the American Nazi Party, which you head. These are some of the most scurrilous materials that I have seen.
Well, have you seen any communist publications?
Yes, I have.
And you don't call some of the things they say about the president scurrilous?
My point was this. While I think that they are scurrilous, they're slick. I am really surprised. The paper is good. The typography is quite good.
The American Nazi trade from the Jews on Madison Avenue. I know the business of production, publication, advertising. I took first prize in the United States for commercial art in 1948.
It takes money to print this kind of stuff.
Well, it doesn't take half as much money as it does determination to do first quality work. One of the big faults of the right wing is it puts out trashy looking stuff, especially the extreme right wing. I won't tolerate that. I do most of that work myself.
How do you equate your publications with, say, Common Sense?
Well, Common Sense is not National Socialist, it's not Nazi, it's simply anti-Semitic, which I think is a misnomer. It's anti-Jewish is all Common Sense is.
That is your raison d'etre. That is...
Oh, no, sir, no. My raison d'etre is not hate, it is love of my people. I love the white and non-Jewish European people who built this great nation, the whole family of them. The Germans, the Greeks, the Italians, the Irish, the Germans, all the people that go to make up this great country who originally came here and built this nation. And I see no reason whatsoever to call it hate, because I love those people and do not want to see them overwhelmed by a minority, which is now happening.
But your methods, at least the image portrayed by the American Nazi Party, is one of fear. You know, if anybody, and I'm going to level with you, has any problem with being bound up or a constipation problem, they can throw out their sal hepatica and their laxatives and have an interview with George Lincoln Rockwell, because I was scared when I knew that we were going to sit down.
You don't find me starting any trouble. Tomorrow I'm going to have a rally here in San Francisco, and you will find that the literature being put out on the campuses all around here is extremely scurrilous. They can't use the exact words, but they almost openly call for violence. They ask for the armed fist of the proletariat to come down there and smash us. I'm not saying I'm going to go up and smash their colleges. I'm going down there to speak at the Civic Center, and I do believe they will be down there by the thousands. And you see who starts the trouble. It will not be me. If I did, I would have long ago been in the penitentiary. We obey the law. We uphold law and order even when we don't agree with the laws. We think the way to do it is to change the laws, not go out and break the laws and have sit-downs and so forth. We are law-abiding, peaceful people. The reason that there is some fear of us is because if you punch us in the nose, we'll punch you back. We're not peace creeps.
In Madison Avenue parlance, your image is lousy.
That's a lot of garbage. I could make it a lot stronger than that. The fact what you're...
My question is, aren't you by this bad image, at least this is the impression I get, obviously, Nazism is bad, to equate it to its least common denominator. Now, when you take a position against communists, aren't you in turn and in fact really helping their cause?
Why, you sound like a member of the Birch Society. This is exactly what the Birch Society claims, that I'm an agent of the Communist Party. The fact of the matter is, somebody has got to oppose communism with more than words, and we do that. When communists operate, their major weapon is terror. They've never taken over a nation by argument and by ideas. They use terrorism, and it's usually in the street. The battle is being fought in the streets of America right now. No other right-wing organization except us has the guts to get out there and oppose them. Now, this may inspire fear, but it shouldn't inspire fear in the hearts of anybody except traitors to this country who are using force and violence and terror trying to take us over.
The term peace creeps is one that I think is in the dictionary of the American Nazi Party.
We invented the word. All I ask, if you're going to question the word, just take a look at the bums. And that's the word to it. Bums would be more descriptive than maybe creeps, except they won't fight. They're a bunch of sorry-looking, broken-down, dirty, filthy, scummy bums is what they are, the peace creeps.
The interesting question, however, is the term peace creeps has been used a number of times in the San Francisco Bay Area by members of the Hells Angels motorcycle group. Is there, in fact, a liaison between the two organizations?
Well, let me say this about Hells Angels. Hells Angels do a lot of things that are antisocial, no question about it, and I disapprove of these. At the same time, I think our civilization has become so rotten, so absolutely putrid and degenerate, that I can see where an aggressive male is so disgusted by the peace creepism and the rottenness of our society that he reacts to it with violence and hatred. And I think this is, in many cases, what the Hells Angels people do. They're mostly masculine, aggressive men who will not tolerate this peace creepism, and they react simply by lashing out in more or less of a fury and without too much reason. At the same time, I would point this out. If you had met a group, most of my kind of people deeply admire the Vikings. In fact, all over the world today, you'll hear great things about how great the Vikings were. Well, the Vikings were almost exactly like Hells Angels. They went out on raiding parties. They took over towns. People were terrified of the Vikings. They had long hair, and they were, instead of using motorcycles or bikes, they went around in boats. But they were exactly, the Vikings did almost precisely what Hells Angels do. And because it's way back in history and they were our folks, now we admire it. I think that the only thing that where the Hells Angels and I differ is we have a political creed. Hells Angels is simply blindly lashing out at a rotten society.
Then you imply by that answer that there is no definitive link between the Angels and the American Nazi Party.
None whatsoever. I think that they instinctively, I've never heard of a Hells Angels putting on a hammer and sickle. They put on the swastika because they instinctively know that we're men of force, and they are. Our force is much more subtle and sophisticated, and it aims at political power first. And theirs is simply direct and violent. But the instincts that motivate the two are pretty much the same.
Your relationship with the Ku Klux Klan.
Here in California, the head of the Ku Klux Klan is 100% with us, and I am 100% with him as far as his goals go. As far as the tactics of the Klan go, we differ. I think that terrorism is a very valid weapon. It is a necessary weapon, especially in any kind of a guerrilla war, or any time when the enemy is using terrorism against you, as the communists are, and as the abolitionists did in the South. After the Civil War, the only weapon they had to get white supremacy back and to stop the rule of ignorant black men who were destroying the South, the only weapon they had was terrorism, and it worked because it was total. Terrorism will no longer work in this country because it cannot be total. When you go out and you commit an act of terrorism, which is not total, all you do is increase the will of the enemy to resist. You produce martyrs, and this is what I think the Klan does in the South. They go out and they knock off a coon or two, and this makes the entire coon community madder than hell. And it produces martyrs for the Northern press. It organizes the liberal movement to go and fight for that poor dead coon. And I think this is a mistake.
When you use words like coon, are you putting me on?
You said there's no limits. I'm not putting you on here. I'm simply talking from my heart. I'm not, in most radio stations, I wouldn't use that word. But this is Pacifica. You've got Reds and LSD people and all kind of creeps on here. And I'm simply going to take the same rights that they demand and speak as I do normally.
You're not about to tell me how many members you have in the American Nazi Party.
Sure I am. We have nothing. I don't hide. We're a very, very small, fanatical minority group. All through history. History has been changed almost entirely by small, fanatical groups. And I don't hide the fact that we're very small. We're so radical that we have to be small. We're selectively small. Our very name and symbol ensures that almost nobody will join except people who are really all the way out. For instance, let's say that you and I talk here for an hour, and at the end of the hour you say, by God, Rockwell, I'm for you. You're right. I'm a Nazi. And you said that on the air. How long would you have your job here at this radio station where we're speaking?
I'm asking the questions.
Well, I didn't mention the call letters because I don't know whether we're even supposed to be here, but I'm just simply saying to you, when you keep saying how unpopular I am, we have millions...
You are, let's face it.
That's a lot of baloney, sir. The only places I'm unpopular is in the hothouse community of the academic world where they don't know what's going on out in the real world, out in the streets, out where the millions of working Americans are, where they have to rub elbows with Negroes and work with them and live with them. They hate them, and they're hoping and praying that I'll be able to stop what's going on. They're all with me in Chicago. I know this as a matter of fact. The only thing that holds millions of Americans back from joining me is fear.
Do you think the polarization is now complete?
Oh, no. If it were complete, I would have tomorrow in the streets, I would have 100,000 white Christians out there behind me. Instead of that, I'll have almost nobody, and the enemy will be out there to wipe us out. Because the white Christian people are still too terrified, and they still believe that there's some other way to do it, the Birch Society and all these nice ways, until it gets polarized to the point where they see it's black against white, Jew against Gentile, communist against anti-communist, which means Nazism. That's the only way that we're going to be able to win. Until it gets to that point, we will continue to be a tiny little voice in the wilderness, so to speak, fighting for our survival.
George Lincoln Rockwell, are you lonely?
Next, you're going to ask me if I sleep with my mother, and so I can see what you're leading up to. If you remember, I wanted somebody to oppose me on here, and you were going to get a Negro psychiatrist, and I'd have been tickled to death because this is the way they usually lead up. I am lonely because I lost my wife. I had a very dear wife, a happy family, a happy home, happy children, thoroughly adjusted, to use all the psychiatric terms. I had everything that a man could want in the way of emotional satisfaction from my wife and children. And I lost them in this battle because of the terrorism of my enemies. They didn't come by and argue with me. They threw bombs. And they knocked my wife down in the grocery store. They called up and called her a whore. And they said they were going to cut the testicles off my little boys. And she cried and so forth. I finally sent her away for her own safety. And after a year of being away, she divorced me. So I am lonely. I have no close human contacts. I am unable to have such contact because of the position I have placed myself politically.
That's the interesting question. I am not a psychoanalyst.
No, but I've been through this so many. I've been in the bugger. They threw me in the booby hatch, and I had to answer all the psychiatrist's questions honestly, and even the Jewish psychiatrist admitted I was thoroughly sane.
The Guide to Subversive Organizations and Publications is issued by the Committee on Un-American Activities of the United States House of Representatives.
No, sir. The Guide to Subversive Organizations and Publications is issued by the Attorney General and by the Senate, not by the House Committee.
Prepared and released by the House Committee.
I do not believe so. That's part of this U.S.
There it is.
Released by the committee. Oh, well, this particular copy.
Well,
the guide is put out by the Attorney General's list of subversive organizations. Is not the House Committee list. It's the Attorney General's list.
This particular United States government publication I have, which comes from the 87th Congress, second
published
session.
by the House Committee. That doesn't mean that the list is made up by the House Committee.
No. Right. We agree on something.
All right.
You're not in here.
Of course I'm not in there. They can't put me in there. They have tried all sorts of ways, but they're scared to death to even try, because if they do, they've got to give me a hearing. And on the day they give me a hearing, I can start subpoenaing people. And when I get finished with them, instead of listing me as subversive, they'll have the Anti-Defamation League and some of these other people on the griddle.
It's incomprehensible to me that the American Nazi Party, under your tutelage, would not be in this Guide to Subversive... You are a secret organization.
We're not secret. I've just told you. I'm happy to tell you. We've got about 500 stormtroopers. I'll give you their names right here in San Francisco. There's nothing secret about it at all whatsoever. In order to be subversive, you've got to advocate the violent overthrow of the government and or be working for a foreign power. We are not advocating the violent overthrow of the government, and we are not working for foreign power. Those are matters of fact. How in the hell are they going to list us as subversive?
The United States government... has listed some pretty innocuous organizations
here.
Like
which innocuous organization?
Oh, let's see. Let me just pick one at random. You probably know them all, too.
I know them backwards and forwards, and they are not innocuous. Almost every one they have in there, with the exception of the right-wing organizations, which are almost all out of existence, like the Japanese Dragon Society of Tojos and so forth. All the left-wing societies, the Russian-American Friendship Society you have there and so forth, are outright communist organizations seeking to overthrow this government by force and violence.
Friends of the Chinese Democracy. Do you know that one?
Sure.
I don't know that. Do you know all these in here?
Friends of the Chinese Democracy. I wonder how long we'd last having a talk like this in the so-called Chinese democracy. Our heads would be hanging up on the telephone poles, dripping in the morning.
You have international alliances.
We do. We have organizations all over the world. We're still extremely small. I think we're now, and don't tell me now that I'm comparing myself to Jesus, because I'm not. I'm speaking tactically now in my analogy. We are now much in the position of the early Christians, or the communists in the early stages. We have small... in some cases, one man in many nations, but in others we have larger groups, and in some nations there are many people, as in England, for instance. I have Colin Jordan and a very large group of people.
How do you view the nomination of Lester Maddox in Georgia?
Well, I almost jumped up and kicked my heels. I know Lester Maddox, and he's a great American. He's a good man all the way. There's no phony about him. If he gets in, you will have the first unadulterated American in as a politician that I know of. He's way far above George Wallace.
Make a comparison. He's above George Wallace.
Oh, he's above George Wallace. George Wallace is the best so far with any power. But George Wallace, for instance, comes out and says racism is evil. In other words, the white man is not superior to the Negro. And this is the very lie that is destroying our country, because people are too afraid to tell the truth. The Negro is not equal to the white man. He's biologically inferior. I'm not saying every Negro. I'm saying the average Negro, pure-blooded black Negro, is unable to compete with the average white man. Even though this trashy white men are much worse than a lot of Negroes, because I always get the same argument. The average white man is above the average Negro. George Wallace will not admit that. Lester Maddox will tell you that right to your face and on television.
Well, I won't admit it either, because there's too much anthropological evidence to the contrary.
14 million... Try looking at your anthropological evidence down here in the ghetto of Fillmore and some of these areas and see whether you think people that throw rocks and bottles at policemen and firemen for no reason that are coming down there to help them, you think this shows their anthropological equality?
$14 million is spent annually, at least according to one statistic I read, on extreme conservative and radical right-wing causes. How do you view, on the political spectrum, such organizations as the Liberty Lobby, Christian Anti-Communist Crusade, the Birch Society? How do you figure these rightos?
I see these things as kindergartens for the American Nazi Party. The best people I am now getting are graduates of the Birch Society. They get into the Birch Society because they become concerned about communism. They start studying communism, and they begin to run into the Finkelsteins, the Cohens, the Rosenbergs, and so forth, and they begin to notice that all the spies we catch and all the communist leaders are Jewish. So they go to Mr. Welch and they say, how about this, Mr. Welch? Look at all these Jews here in communism. What about this? And Mr. Welch hollers and screams and jumps up and down and says, oh, you're an agent of the Communist Party, saying a thing like that. And the people with any sense go back and see that it's a fact. It's true that the Jews are thicker and flies in the middle of a bucket of molasses in the Communist Party. And Mr. Welch not only won't admit that, but he sets up and says Jews are the greatest Americans that ever came down the pike. So the result is these people get out of the Birch Society, the smart ones, and join me. So it's a very good little recruiting area and kindergarten for the American Nazi Party. Secondly, I think the Birch Society and all these groups you've mentioned are a proof of a trend which I believed would occur in this country 10 years ago. When I first wrote the program of the American Nazi Party, more than 10 years ago, I believed that it was far too radical. It was almost crazy at that point to have a thing called the American Nazi Party and a swastika and a thing as radical as we are. But I believed that the country was going to start moving to the right faster and faster and faster. And I have preached since the beginning that by 1972 it will be all the way over there where I am now.
Yeah, but the right is the right, and the American Nazi Party is out in left field someplace.
How do you support that, sir?
Merely because you advocate racial discrimination.
Will you name me any left-wing organization that advocates racial discrimination?
Can't. Don't know any.
Well, I can tell you all the left-wing organizations that I know of advocate racial equality. The Communist Party, the Zionist...
I want to talk about that, by the way.
Well, every communist left-wing organization, what you just said is the Birch line. This is the Birch Society, says, because I call myself a National Socialist, that I am therefore a communist. And actually, National Socialism is the diametrical opposite of communism in every way because it's racial. National Socialism is Christian and Gentile, and communism is Jewish and Negro. And it's a diametrical polarization of these two racial groups in this country. And the Birch Society is too chicken to admit that, and therefore they put it on economic grounds and try to throw me in the pot like you just did with the leftists.
It's been postulated that the American Communist Party numbers some 10,000, many of whom are members of the FBI, and that there's almost an unofficial subsidization of the Communist Party by the FBI. Do you agree with the figure 10,000?
Sir, when people tell me that there's only 10,000 communists, this goes back to the business when they prove that Bishop Oxnam, for instance, didn't have a Communist Party card, therefore he wasn't a communist. The communists are far too sophisticated and clever anymore to go around waving Bolshevik flags and carry Communist Party cards and say I'm a Communist Party member. They may only have 10,000 who do this. They don't need any more because they got their boys in the White House. Why should they be bothered to have a big Communist Party when they got them into the State Department, they got them in the Justice Department, they got them all over the Office of Economic Opportunities, full of them and so forth?
Well, that's rubbish.
Rubbish!
It is rubbish.
All you have to do is talk to them, sir. I speak at the colleges all the time, and when I speak at a college, I have them come up to me and openly tell me what they are.
But what your implication, and it's a very strong one, is that there are people in the higher echelons of U.S. government who are advocating the violent overthrow of the United States government.
No, sir, I didn't say that. I said they believe in Marxism. They're communists, and a communist believes in Marxism. Some of them are Trotskyites and believe it should be done internationally and slower. Some of them are progressive laborites, and they are violent. And some of them call themselves just plain socialists, the Young Socialist Leagues and so forth. They all believe in the doctrines of Karl Marx. And this, in my opinion, if a guy is a Marxist, he is, in essence, a communist, whether he carries a party card, and I'm speaking in the parlance of the average man. A Marxist is a communist, and our colleges, our government, are full of Marxists.
I have to impute to you specious platitudes because you haven't named any names, you know?
Well, I'll be very happy to name some names. I think Eleanor Roosevelt...
Let's talk about people who are alive today.
Well, all right, let me take a second now. I'm not
sure.
going to rush me.
Well, we got plenty of time.
You want the name of somebody in government that I think is a communist?
Yes.
All right. Let's take somebody in the State Department, a fellow named William Weiland, who was effected the transfer of Cuba from Batista, who was pro-American, to Castro. And Mr. Weiland suppressed and he's in the State Department, time and time again, he suppressed the clear evidence that Castro was a communist. He had the evidence. Time and again, he refused to let it out, and it's been investigated by the Senate Internal Security Subcommittee, and the man is still there.
We talked a little earlier about the alleged FBI infiltration into the Communist Party. You've probably had a little static from the FBI, huh?
I don't have a bit of trouble with the FBI because I tell them the truth. They don't have to sneak around and follow me around. I told them they can have a short arm inspection if they want any time. I have nothing to hide. They don't have to tap my phone. I'll be happy to have my phone tapped because I can't be accused of a conspiracy. I'd like to have a recording of everything on my phone. In fact, I have several people that I suspect are FBI agents, and if I knew how to get more, I'd ask Mr. Hoover to send them because they're wonderful guys.
You mean in your organization?
Sure. The FBI men that I have met are professional. They don't favor me. They don't do anything for me. But I have never yet run into persecution or unlawful actions or unprofessional conduct of any kind by the FBI.
And what about the civilian or the civil police? You've been arrested a number of times.
It all depends on where they are and who they are. From the political levels of some police forces, I have had a very, very bad time, particularly in the South. At the top levels of the police forces in the South, and at some of the lower levels, unfortunately, they're either ignorant or they're lying, and they claim that I'm a communist. I had a great big deputy sheriff in New Orleans come into me, he put me in a cell all by myself, and he came in and he said he was going to tear me to pieces, and he was going to, and he was a monster, and he could have. And I only stopped him by slowing him down. I said, well, before you do this, would you just please tell me why I'm going to get it? He says, you guy, I can't use the language, he said, but you damn communist race-mixing son of a bitch. He thought I was a freedom rider. And this has been spread around by the right wing, that I'm working for Martin Luther King and all this sort of thing. So in some southern communities, I have a hard time with the police department because they think I'm the enemy. In northern police departments, the worst we've ever run into is in Philadelphia, where the Jews totally control the police department. The police officers there are all right, most of them, but they are under total and complete orders from the worst police administration that I know of in the country. In fact, it was so bad that when Mayor Lindsay in New York wanted a real rotten sellout police commissioner, he went and got Leary from Philadelphia, the very man that had been giving us all the trouble. And he sold out the police in New York, and now he's going to reap the rewards. Namely, he's going to have anarchy and black terror in the streets of New York until the people finally throw him and the whole thing out.
You know, what you say to me is, and this is an unpsychiatric word, but irrational, and yet I am amazed.
Wait a minute. Yeah. Stop. What did I say that's irrational, sir? Let's be specific.
Oh, that, it's a Jewish conspiracy running the police department.
I didn't say it was a Jewish conspiracy.
Well, your literature says it.
Well, now, wait a minute. You just said what I said was irrational. Now, I'm never able to pin you guys down. What did I just say that's irrational? If you can show it to me, I will take it back and apologize. What did I say?
That the police department in Philadelphia is run by Jews.
Well, let me give you an example. Now, if this is irrational, you tell me where. Ralph Forbes, Captain Ralph Forbes, who was my commanding officer in the Los Angeles area, was sent up to Philadelphia on a mission He was grabbed, thrown in prison under a Jewish warden, Solomon Bookbinder, in the Moymenching prison. He was forced by the guards there to bend over and spread his cheeks at the chow line, where almost all the inmates were black, and they were all going by with the Jewish warden there and the guards making him do this. Then when he got out and was tried and was released and beat the case, he went to the police station to pick up his stuff, and he was beaten by a Jewish mob in the police station. And the police officers leaned over the counter and watched him being beaten in the police station by a Jewish mob who openly identified themselves as Jews, Zionists. Now, why is it irrational to say that when the police allow this sort of thing in a police station, that there might not be some evidence of some Jewish control of the police? If it was a Nazi mob beating a Jew, how long do you think he'd have lasted?
You've asked me 3 questions, and I haven't answered one yet. I don't think
you haven't got any answers, so they're always accusing me of being irrational, and when I say, name the irrational statement, they always say, oh, well, you say this and that, but they won't say what it is I've said that's irrational. You may mention my literature. Take a piece of it there. Find something in there that you call irrational.
No.
Yeah, I know. You're horrified because you can't do it.
It's unsavory, really. It is, you know,
well,
like
the truth,
boat ticket to Africa, for example.
Well, now, the boat ticket to Africa does not represent itself. It does not purport to be nor hold itself out to be any kind of a rational presentation. It's a joke. It says Cunard lines up at the top. Boat ticket to Africa. This ticket entitles one nigger and so forth to a free cut of missionary. Now, you know nobody's going to serve missionary to anybody, and that we're not going to cut up a missionary. It's a joke, and if people are going to insist on taking a joke as a serious thing and then saying it's irrational, I can't argue with them.
You know, speaking of jokes, I didn't read the Playboy article. Everybody asked me today when I told them you were coming in that you had an article in Playboy. But I did learn something that was in that article, that your father was a great vaudevillian. We have a vaudevillian here on the staff who had tremendous respect for the person who, what was his first name?
Doc Rockwell.
Doc Rockwell. What did he do? I don't know him.
He was a comedian. He started off in all sorts of, he started off as a magician, I believe, and he wound up as a single, he was the first guy to sit down in stage one, as they called it in the theater, right out in front of the curtain all by himself and talk for an hour or so, and he really captivated the audience.
Well, was he a man of your social proclivities?
Good heavens, no. No, my father will have nothing to do with what almost all his friends are Jewish. He stoutly maintains that everything I believe, as you say, is irrational, is impossible, and he won't go along with it at all.
Well, that must be quite a hang-up, a personal hang-up for you.
It doesn't make me happy, if that's what you mean.
Well, you obviously, you know, are a man with a mission. That is pretty obvious. Your family has been destroyed because of your work.
Exactly.
Isn't there a complete, when you can, in those rare moments, get a little bit away from yourself, George Lincoln Rockwell, isn't there a complete sense of futility about what you're trying to do?
Not a bit, sir. I see everything that I predicted and have worked for coming true, day by day, week by week, year by year. I see the Jews screaming. They're going, first of all, they said they were going to black me out. Nobody would ever hear of me. This is what they said in Virginia. This is a matter of record, by the way. The Columbia Journalism Review ran an article last year called The General Suppression by Ben Bagdickian, who writes for the Anti-Defamation League, in which he said that Rockwell has been blacked out, and they were calling it into question whether that was perhaps a wise thing to do. So it is the fact that they tried to black me out. It has not worked.
How? What do you mean by black you out? What does that mean?
Jewish advertisers who control the policies of most of our newspapers, the 3 Jews who control our television networks, ABC, NBC, and CBS, NBC, ABC, and CBS, all of these people, the people that control the magazines and so forth, the Zimbalists that control the Saturday Evening Post, all these people have decreed that George Lincoln Rockwell will simply not be mentioned except his obituary. And I have time and again outwitted them and forced them to print a notice of my activities because I have made news. And there simply is no way they can avoid mentioning the fact when we make news. As much as they've tried to black out. For instance, if Martin Luther King were having a riot here tomorrow, now they're going to accuse me of a Freudian slip. If he were having a rally here tomorrow, that this would be national news. But George Lincoln Rockwell is having one here, and it's just as sensational. I'm just going to speak. And the communists, I've just seen some of the flyers being put out at the colleges, and the socialist alliances and so forth are preparing to come down there and smash it all up. Now, this would ordinarily be quite some big news, but you don't hear a word about it in the TV. There's nothing about it tonight. No, you don't hear almost nothing of it at all. The attempt is being made to black it out. But fortunately, my enemies are too stupid to go along with the Jews in this situation. They will come down and try to kill me, and in the process, we will get the news that they try to deny me. Now, when you say, don't I feel futile, I have managed with no money, no rich friends. I'm not Mr. Welch. I'm not a general. I have no tremendous backing. I have no platform to start from. I have managed to hurl myself up into international prominence on nothing. Now, why would I consider this futile? That's the first step in becoming, into winning power. Legally, you have to become known. Well, I have become known. And my next step I'm working on now is to begin to win people over to what it is that I'm really for rather than the phony image. And I'm doing this.
There are rumors about that there is an underground financial pipeline into the American Nazi Party by some pretty affluent people. I won't mention them because they're rumors.
I would to God it were true. Someday it may be true. I think that just as in Germany, Hitler starved to death for years, until finally the Ruhr industrialists realized that the so-called nationalists, the conservatives of those times, were too feeble and weak and helpless and incapable to actually stop communism, which was reaching for their wallet pockets. And at that point, they backed Adolf Hitler. I believe the same thing will happen here in this country. I think the industrialists that I have met in my travels, and I've known quite a few of them when I was working with Russell McGuire at Mercury magazine and some of these people.
American Mercury, the old anti-Semitic magazine. Or the new one, for that matter.
No, the old one. It was Mercury Magazine that Russell McGuire ran for years. I was his assistant there at his headquarters on Fifth Avenue. And with him, I met dozens of top industrial magnates of this country. And I can tell you, when the day comes when they think they can get away with it, you're going to have a big surprise. The only reason they don't back me now is because they can't believe I can win. But when they see there's no other hope, they will.
The sense of utility about which I spoke a moment ago must have been very, very indelibly etched on your psyche when you lost the gubernatorial nomination of your home state.
Not at all, sir. When you are fighting with almost no money and you're completely blacked out of the press, when they get injunctions from, I had a booth at the state fair, couldn't even have that. I couldn't pass out literature. We're stopped from doing everything. In every direction we went, we were stopped. And most of all, the Birch Society absolutely cremated me. All over the state of Virginia, they were going around telling everybody they possibly could that I was a communist. And the communists had sent me in there as an agent provocateur and so forth. The fact that I got 1% of the vote, 8,000 people voted for a Nazi as governor of Virginia. It was very encouraging, and I have since found out by talking to many Virginians who say they're for me, and I say, well, did you vote for me? They say no. And when I ask why, their answer is, and it makes sense, they figured that the situation wasn't that rough. If they put me in as governor and I got elected, that they would have a war on their hands with the federal government the next morning. And they might have been right.
Are you going to campaign for Lester Maddox?
No, sir. I'm going to be very careful not to campaign for Lester Maddox, because I want him to win.
In other words, in the California gubernatorial candidacy, one of the candidates might be willing to pay you $100 for the endorsement of the other guy.
The figure, sir, is $100,000, and I've already been approached, and I will have no part of it. I will not be a prostitute for anybody. I believe in my cause with all my heart and soul, and not for all the money in the world. No matter how badly we need it, will I sell out to endorse somebody to screw another guy.
Can you tell more about that? That's fascinating.
Wouldn't think about it.
You have been approached by...
I'm not going to say another word about it, because I don't want to... I'm just not going to do it. I didn't take the deal, and that's the end of it.
All right. Where does freedom of speech stop? That is the question. I think just before winding up with George Lincoln Rockwell, head of the American Nazi Party, I'd like to get your opinion of two people.
Shoot.
One is Revilo P. Oliver.
Revilo? You mean Revelo?
I don't know the man.
Revilo, yeah.
Well, he reviles me.
Yeah. Well, he should probably revile you if you're with Pacifica radio stations. Revilo P. Oliver is one of the most brilliant men that I have ever heard speak or read a word written by, and he's brilliant enough to have gotten out of the Bird Society, and I think he's only the first bird of spring. I think there'll be a lot more.
Why did he get out?
I think he got out because Mr. Welch is becoming increasingly cowardly about the Jewish problem, and I think he realizes that the membership of the society will not forever tolerate this we just love Jews garbage much more. Even more important, according to Mr. Welch's policies, the Jews are just wonderful, and he takes them in and lets them rise up and so forth. There's no way that he can stop them from rising to top leadership, because the minute he tries to stop them, it's anti-Semitism. So I believe the Jews will rise up at the top of the Birch Society and take it over, and Mr. Oliver saw that coming and got out.
The final question is, what do you think of Ayn Rand's philosophy of objectivism?
I think Ayn Rand's philosophy is the effort of my opposition, just like Barry Goldwater was a political effort, to put their guys in charge of our movement. Here they had a Jew trying to run for the United States presidency on my side, supposedly. I think Ayn Rand, as she calls herself, I don't know why she can't be Ann like anybody else, but I think what her job is to do is philosophically to lead National Socialist-type people down a dead alley, down a dead end. I think, in other words, her philosophy is Schopenhauer, Nietzsche, National Socialism, and all this sort of thing, deprived of its guts, castrated.
The words of Voltaire have permeated my mind throughout this interview. The man speaking was George Lincoln Rockwell of the American Nazi Party. This is Gene D'Alessi.
So traumatizing is the key, and desensitizing. And then they would be completely reprogrammable with whatever personality the psychologist saw fit. Even in the 70s, the CIA admitted that over 10,000 children had been taken from orphanages and entered into MK-Ultra programs, which is just heartbreaking. Leonard Cohen in Montreal underwent experiments, at least some willingly. But Cohen comes from a long line with quite a dark occult connection.
It's how long's it been since we last talked?
It could be over 6 weeks. I think could even be 7 weeks, I think, since the last time.
Apologies for having to cancel on you last minute last week. It's family, things just happen, and I just had to reschedule. I was exhausted. I had appointments the next day, and we are like many hours apart. It's fresh early in the morning for you. I think, is it 7:30 in the morning or something?
It's 8 a.m. So yeah,
that's it. It's hitting midnight for me almost. So it's we're complete opposite ends of the spectrum. But we're here to talk about the occult in art and some hidden things, and maybe get a bit conspiratorial today, I believe. So what do you have for me today? I'm excited. What have you got for us?
Here we are looking at Jasper Johns, another kind of famous artists from the past. And I just wanted to remind people that what I'm doing really is I'm hoping to show some research and digging deep on some things that I think are not either widely known, or I have perhaps a completely fresh take on things that are perceived in general very, very differently. But I'm hoping to show a methodology more than anything, so that people listening to this will go out there and do their own research, sort of see through new eyes, come up with more details, more information, not just about the people that we've looked at, but all of the other artists. And ultimately what we're doing together is looking at, well, what is your art? How is art used? What is art for in our culture? And rather than just taking the mainstream perceived line on that, we're looking a bit deeper and finding that it intersects with almost every aspect of our, kind of controlled, globalist, anti-Christian agenda, basically, and fine. And so I'm really hoping that these will inspire other people to go and look elsewhere. Plus, perhaps get people to look a little bit deeper at some of the points that I come up with. Because I've got, especially in this presentation, I wasn't expecting necessarily to dig up what I did dig up. And I haven't necessarily gone through all of the detail, nor can I hope to present everything that I've found here in this time. We'll really be kind of gunning through to get to 2 hours, and I think it's possible, but there's a lot to talk about. But we're starting off with this artist from 1950s, had his claim to fame, 1950s. He is the most written about artist in America, historically, today, still hundreds of thousands of words written about him, apart from Andy Warhol. So you can imagine Warhol is just a little bit more discussed, talked about, publicized. But we might, in our generation, think that his art is not so relevant, and yet it's something really important here that we want to go back and look at. Why was it so lauded? Why is it still shown to us and revered so greatly? So this is something that Jasper John said himself. He talked very little about the content of his artwork, which a lot of artists would prefer to do that. But he says that he's showing things the mind already knows. And by that he meant that he was painting, early in the 50s, these tropes, like we call them emblems really, targets, American flags and numbers. And that's what he's famous for, and that's what he's still to this day discussed and, ad nauseum, I'd say, for having changed art. His popularity in the mainstream, I guess, with younger artists, especially practicing artists, is probably not so great, but he's still a big hit, you can imagine, at the auction houses and the hedge funds, etc. So these artworks, command millions and millions of dollars. And I think the 2010 work for 110 million in 1958 flags, so quite an old work, sold the most expensive artwork by a living artist. So he's still contemporary, he's still alive today, but as you could saw from the previous slide, he's now 95. Just to note that that's that Steve Cohen we mentioned in the Picasso presentation, the one who bought the elbow, because Picasso, when he was negotiating with the owner, who accidentally put an elbow through the Picasso, had to wait, and then eventually Cohen, the collector, bought it again. So it's big business selling art. So where does John's fit in? So just to remind ourselves that it's between abstract expressionism and pop art. So abstract expressionists, massive wave of artists that were encouraged, really broke through with, this kind of individualism, non-representational subject matter, but really, seemed to promote American values, large canvases, and to be promoted by America as, an attempt to, pretty successfully, move the center of art world from Europe, Paris in particular, to New York. And expressing feelings, someone to spontaneity, individualism, as I said. His artwork was not expressive, obviously. It was using kind of quite gestural, caustic mediums, but these emblems are, in a sense, ready-made images. So they're familiar to us. They come to us already loaded, unlike the abstract artists with whom you cannot recognize any, figurative content. So later, so after John's, we have the movement of pop art, again, predominantly New York based, certainly big in England as well. And that was, again, using emblems, objects from popular culture, but really often, what we'd say is commercial culture, magazines, supermarkets, advertising. We know now there's no conspiracy here. It's pretty openly accepted now that the CIA sponsored Museum of Modern Art to themselves promote abstract expressionist art in Europe and other places in the world to bring this kind of dominance, this kind of sense that American values of individuality and freedom would be promoted around the world. The challenge to communism, the challenge to Europe, the challenge to the kind of very figurative painting that Russian neorealism art was doing. And it's millions and millions of dollars that they were given to do this. So regardless of what you feel and whether you like or don't like or are moved by this movement of art, it was a movement completely supported. So there are big exhibitions in Japan, Italy, South America, and Europe. And we looked at last time too at those photographs that you think look like school photos, don't they? And they are. They're at the school, the New York School is what they were called. And you just think this is it's a little bit more than, let's get together some of the best names in art. It's like, let's get them together because this is what we're promoting. In one sense, it's not even their individuality. They're all replaceable. They're all ultimately, although their financial worth is still there. A lot of them died, relatively young, and their service to America, I guess, was kind of done. I'd be a bit cynical there, but if you want to look more into it, there's quite a good YouTube that goes through that, how the CIA used Jock Pollock and others to fight the Cold War. And we know some of the things, the signals that we also read, even if those things were dug out about the money given to Museum of Modern Art. You see things like Life magazine, which is an arm of the the establishment. Within a year or two of his first drip painting, he's got a 4-page spread, Jack the Dripper, promoted everywhere. It's just this meteoric instant success, and pushed by certain magazines. It just smells bad to us.
The Jackson Pollock, the greatest living artist, painter in the United States. It's like
the greatest. Is he, or is he just the one? Yes, or he's only been painting a couple of years, and I'm going to the next presentation. I've got some other pretty interesting material about where he got his ideas, his work from. I think some people might already know that story. So what else is going on at the time? Cold War. So remember, after 1945, America imported, well, some say 1,600 and others people say 20,000, mainly German scientists to America. And this was Operation Paperclip. I think it's pretty well known by listeners to your programs. So there's no surprises there. And we know them especially from their involvement in NASA, in the space race, Werner von Braun, Arthur Rudolph, etc. But we sometimes, I think, is underestimated that this also included people who founded or were, formative in the CIA early years and the MK Ultra program. So... and just curiously, there's a lot of very weird stuff about them. A lot of them, they were families. So, we know some of the big names like von Braun and such, etc. But there are lots of families brought over, especially to places like Ohio. There's a huge post-war German population in Ohio, and lots of occult stuff in some of these. You sort of think, why are they setting up in, like a small town in Texas or Dayton, Ohio? Because they were literally moved over here, families and all, to serve the American agendas. And these people are, as I said, occult connected, as well as having had at least pretty ardent, Nazi sympathies. And that's you hear from a lot of the survivors of satanic ritual abuse that some of their activities took place in these smaller towns and by, Nazi, we say such a thing as an ex-Nazi individuals. So the CIA itself, coincidentally, was founded in 1947, formerly the Office of, OSS, Office of Special Services, I forget now. But the Central Intelligence Agencies is really just built on and built out from the OSS. And their mission was to advance national security through collecting and analysing intelligence from around the world and conducting covert operations. So a pretty broad remit. Remember that, in theory at least, the FBI in America is limited to domestic intelligence, but the CIA is offshore. So what we'll find is that a tremendous amount of CIA activity takes place in, Canada, Japan, Germany, offshore. Guantanamo Bay is a good example. That can't occur on American soil. It's got to be in so-called outside of America. So this quest for mind control was, we can say it has several roots, and it certainly goes back way, way, way earlier than the Nazis and World War II research by the scientists investigating that in the camps, in the death camps in Germany. But let's just say, remember, the MK Ultra is just a banner term for what they say is about 149 sub-projects involving over 80 academic institutions, prisons, organisations, most of those, not all, but most of those offshore outside of United States of America. And in 23rd of December last year, the FOI released over 1,200 documents Now that's significant. It's definitely not all the documents. Most of the documents were destroyed when the program officially ended in 1973, but a tremendous amount of documents were released. And it was Dulles, Alan Dulles, even his role before the CIA directorship of 1953, who gave the official order to begin the programs, and headed by Sidney Gottlieb, as we can see, who was a paperclip scientist. So now described as illegal human experimentation designed and undertaken by CIA to develop procedures, identify drugs ostensibly used in interrogations to weaken individuals and force confessions through brainwashing and psychological torture. We'll sort of find that is a sort of a fairly spurious, and oddly defined remit. Gottlieb became an American chemist, so very significant, lot of drug experimentation, and spy master, head of CIA, very active in the assassination arm of Project MKUltra. Retired in 1973, and that's when he took with him or destroyed many documents, but the ones that have survived are themselves extremely damning. So we think about MKUltra and the kinds of activities in terms of, if we saw Clockwork Orange, this is Alex having his mental reprogramming. And this is, having to watch with his eyes pried open, under drug, and tied down to the chair, to watching horrifying images of death, torture, cruelty, etc. And honestly, is this very different than us watching Netflix, except that we choose to watch whatever, Netflix, the streaming services, the kind of violence that is available and encouraged for us to watch. Escalating, isn't it? I caught a tiny bit of your previous show on Understanding Conspiracy, talking about that the sense of trauma to our collective culture includes the fact that we are somehow meant to be kind of immune or at least emotionally distanced from these horrific things we see on a daily basis if we tune into mainstream, movies, gaming, television.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
just
to paraphrase, it was kind of like the guests I had on were saying, we're kind of being desensitized by seeing these things on social media so often, like people being shot, let's say, so openly. But then I was thinking, well, we've kind of always been seeing people dying in horrible, visceral, gory, disgusting ways just through films. It's kind of normal, actually. And it is, and they try and make it as realistic as possible, so is that really, psychologically speaking, like the effect not
the singer? Poet. And we're going to talk about Anne Diamond, who knew Leonard Cohen in Montreal, both as an adult, and she remembers him from childhood. She was a lot younger than him. She would have been a good 15 years younger than him. So she was a little girl when he was already university age at McGill University, and underwent experiments, at least some willingly, or at least volunteered willingly. But that's one version of this sensory deprivation that later on, almost more disturbing, Cohen would say that he enjoyed these sessions. Most others just screamed and begged to, get me out of here. But he actually enjoyed that.
But there is a thing today, isn't there? It's not as popular today as it used to be, but I remember like a decade or two ago, people talk about sensory deprivation tanks, Yeah,
the float tanks, Yeah,
going for therapy, and you start having hallucinations and having a journey to one's own consciousness and self and all this type of thing, having psychedelic experiences. And if there's any truth to those testimonies, obviously they only do it for a little bit and then come out when they're satisfied. But if
when
you
they
were
want,
stuck there and you couldn't leave, that would be hell. Again, talking back to the LSD experience we talked about earlier, or something like a dimethyltryptamine experience. Like you come back eventually and you're back to normal, But if you couldn't leave that state, you would go insane. You would, So interesting.
If you didn't know what drugs were being administered, or if any, So Diamond says he joined a cult, as in they were more than just a group of friends. Like we know that it's kind of just mainstream, biography that Cohen had a mentor there at McGill, but there was also kind of people who are, had kind of these sort of Nazi, ex-Nazi scientists, and also I what did I want to mention about Cameron, I meant to mention when we talked about Cameron going over for the for the trials, the Nazi war criminal tribunals, he actually also had access to all the papers. Did I mention that he had the access to the papers of all of that research? And so we have records of that several times in history where the most horrific, in Japan it happened. A Japanese psychologist, horrific torture experiments on Chinese and during the war. I mean, really horrific, and resulted in, you know, death of many, many people. And in order to get his papers, they offered him immunity. So this evil Japanese scientist was given a free run because he passed over the research. That's how badly the CIA and the government wanted the research. So they admired Crowley, and they met for late night rituals. So there's occult stuff there that's definitely not in the standard biographies.
Red flags immediately.
And there are lots of them.
Crowley worship. You know?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, what good can you find in Crowley? What good? You cannot. So Cohen is a hero around the world, but you can imagine in Montreal, he's Montreal's famous son. So this is interesting too. In 1959, he had a little scholarship, which was a little bit weird, to a grant for his fabulous poetry, to England, where he met Jacob Rothschild, who sent him to Hydra, in the Greek island, where he hooked up with the community there. And coincidentally, most of them seem to be military intelligence or, you know, intelligence agencies from around the world. So while we think, oh, he just went there for the climate. In fact, he always has these really good stories, Cohen. He talks about he just wanted to go somewhere sunnier than London. They don't talk about that he was in Rothschild's house. That's where he stayed. And that he was actually kind of a central player in something that went on with he and other people who ended up on that island. Now, this is an interesting hand gesture. I mean, very meaningful. In one way, you think, well, just hand on heart, isn't that lovely? But Cohen comes from a long line with quite a dark occult connection. So he was described by his mother as Jewish royalty. So not just, as we know, the Cohen name indicates a lineage of priest class. So it's more than that. And his mother, so we know it's a matrilineal ancestry that's important in Jewish culture. We also, look, we have to say, pretty sure there was generational incest going on. So more than one of his girlfriends picked up on that, and he had many girlfriends, but mentioned that there seems to have been, certainly in his childhood and possibly even to adult years, some sexual engagement with his mother. When he was young and living at home, he hypnotized and raped the family maid. So he learnt hypnotism, from where and how, and he practiced it, so that the maid's daughter confirmed that this is what happened. And I think she fell pregnant. So a very odd connection with secret societies, experimented on Allen Memorial, but in one way the Allen Memorial stuff was relatively new in what was already a long line of somebody who was picked out, had a charmed life right from childhood, was being chosen to be part of the system. He didn't hide that. He was a 33-degree Mason. Remember, the 33-degree is not something you can earn. That's something you're given. You can become a 32-degree, but you have to be chosen to be a 33.
Yeah. So,
all right, we're used to hand signals. Normally we're used to the hidden hand, aren't we? That's the one that we see. These are all much, much more recent photographs, of course. And we associate that with, Freemasonry, etc. And the Brotherhoods and all this, everyone from, from Marx to the Beatles. But this hand that's on the outside, I think, might mean something else. And not just, patriotism and I love my country, I'm a good person. I think it might be for a certain select people. So it's even more unusual. Robert Rauschenberg is also shown making that symbol. Rauschenberg was Jasper Johns, coming back to where we started from. Jasper Johns, when he, we'll talk about that in a minute, but he was his lover for about 10 years. So another famous artist, again, in my opinion, quite overrated. This is one of Rauschenberg's work. One of them, again, that was pivotal, that put him on the map, and to me, it sort of seems like pretty kind of weirdly mocking of Freemasonry. I mean, just a really odd, messy. It's very Tracy Emin-y, isn't it? Don't you think?
Yeah. I'm not impressed myself looking at it.
No. And, we do notice, the whole goat thing is definitely, if you look at the floor, is a little bit, check. I don't know. I think there's, again, private references being signal to, what do they call it? Dog whistling to certain people.
I think so, yeah. Secret call of some kind.
Mm-hmm. So, they're lovers for a long time. So lots and lots written about Cohen. I mean, really, and when he died, and, the concerts, and there's the books, the re-releases, the movies, everything that's coming out about him. But really, was he what he pretended to be, what he appeared to be? And this signal that he keeps making.
Maybe
do we really need...
I don't know if you've got an answer for the hand signal. I'm just kind of theorizing here. I mean, we've all heard of the hidden hand. We see it quite often, and it's an indicator that we are of influence. We're in the Brotherhood. We are working the great work behind the scenes, you know. We're not what we've seen, but those who know type of thing. Well, maybe he's more of a public figure and he's on the outside because he's not hidden. Maybe it's
It
something
could
like
be.
this.
And also, you know how I sort of mentioned before that I think we're going to see, you know, Church of John Lennon, Church of Leonard Cohen. Do you know they're idolized really as saint figures?
Yeah.
So he's now post-death, he's become even more that in a way. And do we really need another biography? Well, I'd recommend people go and read Anne Diamond's book. So this is Cohen with his mother as a child. And, you know, she wrote the book a while ago, and she says that, you know, because she was a victim of the experiments as well. I mean, she's a very clear talker, but she sort of says that her book, when it came out, kind of just tumbled out. I definitely recommend looking at her interview. She's very plausible, very, you know, very convincing. But this is the book that she wrote in 2014 called The Man Next Door. And, you know, she describes him a very disturbed individual. You know, his life was a disaster, a triumph of social engineering, transformed himself into a saint, but was really a sociopath. I mean, she's sort of sympathetic to him because she went through the experiments. He went through the experiments. But at the same time, he was involved in some pretty dark things. So, you know, volunteered in Hebb's experiments. A lot of his poems, actually, through different eyes, read as quite scary, like they're describing torture of animals, or there's a lot of use of violence and guns. He learnt hypnotism. This is the old one eye thing. So on the Greek island of Hydra, or Hydra, a lot of other interesting people turned up there. These jolly, you know, Allen Ginsberg, Lennon, Onassis and Callas. You know, you just think, So it's not just big. It wasn't fashionable then. It wasn't, you know, it was a fairly kind of simple life. Nice place to live. It's more like a hideaway where you get your orders, where you get a little bit more programming. He famously wrote So Long Marianne about Marianne one in the bikini there. And she had a child or had just been left by her lover, Axel. Oh, I just got mad about his name, Axel. Oh, I'll remember in a minute. But he was a spy for Norway. He was a Norwegian spy. So some are just have been confirmed, and I think it must mean that George Johnson and Charming Clift were also, you know, operatives. They're Australians. And really, when we see these things, so that a photographer from Life magazine was sent to Hydra to photograph Cohen and all of the others within a year of him arriving there, and took 1,600 photos. So Life magazine was ready to promote this band of merry bohemians. The magazine, the article never got printed. But you just think this is way too early to identify, you know, and why is this so, you know, worldly important that Life magazine in America was planning to do a massive story about them. He was Cohen is no secret. I mean, they called him Captain Mandrax. He just took piles of mandrax, quaaludes they're called in America, and speed to write. And he took them often together, which is bizarre, and, you know, again, something that's used in the MK Ultra experiments. Took them to sleep, took them to write, took them to wake. And he was just really a mess but you could buy these without prescription. So he was self-medicating, but enormous amounts, which, you know, as we know too, this take a toll on the body and the mind in any case. I'm not going to talk much about this, but Marianne's son with Axel, the son is also called Axel, was aged 15 when his father Axel took him to India and gave him LSD. And he had mental health issues from thereafter and has lived basically in an asylum, assisted living in, it's Norway. It's not gone blank whether it's Sweden or Norway now. But he said that Cohen had a dark side. And I think he didn't just mean his temper. I think, I'm not going to say it out loud, but he said he loved him a lot and he missed him, but he even with his dark side. So even more convincing, Diamond has evidence that he was used in certain missions by the CIA and Mossad, because she also a little bit later than this time, moved to Hydra. And here's that hidden hand again. So that he would come and go on certain missions that she knew about, goodness knows how many others. And Leonard used to say things like, I have a double who does all the bad things. And she says that she can tell when some of the photographs of Cohen from that time are not him. There's someone who's a stand-in who looks like him. And he does look different in different photos, I must say. One thing not so commonly known about Cohen is that he collected pistols and rifles. Doesn't quite fit with the heart-sensitive, you know, beautiful, you know, poetic soul, does it? He also had weapons training. He taught his children to shoot. This is a second batch of children that he had with Suzanne. He taught them to shoot or at least how to handle a gun when they were 6 and laughable, but there are many alters, and she thinks there might have been hundreds. Another one, I keep running into these. I don't go looking really, but doppelgangers like Dustin Hoffman, Leonard Cohen, and even maybe Al Pacino, although I think that's a bit of a stretch. They could easily stand in for one another, couldn't they? Again, whether they're siblings, we've sort of working out this kind of, by observation, the sense in which siblings are sent to grow up in completely different families, but they are, genetic siblings.
It's funny you mentioned siblings. I know this is a throwback to one of our previous presentations, a little bit unrelated, but I made a thumbnail of Oppenheimer and O'Keefe. And I didn't realize it when I made the thumbnail, but they also look suspiciously like siblings. Like, very similar to each other. I mean, I suppose we didn't kind of clock this while making it, but just how connected are all these artists and world movers and culture creators.
And how small is the gene pool? And how small is the gene pool? Do you know, like, and how do they get cross-referenced? It's not, they don't have to be twins. It's amazing. Like with Trump, some of them just don't even look alike, and yet we accept the same person in a role if the role is bigger than the person. So these people are stand-ins for one another. But yeah, I hadn't realized until you mentioned it, and somebody pointed out in comments as well, that there's really a strong resemblance between Oppenheimer and O'Keefe. That amazing. And then they turn up, I mean, they remain connected even though they grew up, as far as we know, completely separate parts of the world. Another time that Cohen turns up in an odd, just before the the Bay of Pigs event in Cuba, which occurred in 1961 when Kennedy was newly president, and it was a forced invasion of this bay in Cuba. It was a spectacular failure and defeated by Castro's forces, and the American soldiers were killed, were captured. It was absolutely humiliation for America and a disaster. But Cohen is there literally a month before and when it begins. So what role is it? That's him in the middle, dressed up like a Cuban militia. Whose side is he playing on? I mean, Diamond says she doesn't know whether he was just a mercenary for hire. He had these incredible skills, or whether he worked for Mossad sometimes CIA, and factions within factions would just hire him. But what role did he play in this? I mean, again, in standard films, he just says, he's got these incredible throwaway lines. He says, "I just went there for the suntan." I mean, is Justin Trudeau Fidel Castro's son or what? And we also know that Margaret Trudeau was herself, seems to have had an MK Ultra background. Again, one of those women who says that she's slept with over 1,000 men, doesn't remember most of them. That's her presenting little baby Justin to Fidel. So Cohen receiving medals, we just come back to medals later. They love their medals. Again, it's signalling, well, we think big deal, but to you and I, medals, it means a big thing in the system. So, this, if not the real assassin for John Lennon. So this was when Diamond was staying on Hydra, this is 1980. Well, we think big deal, but to you and I, medals, but it means a big thing in the system. So, this sense that he's done public service. Another place he turns up is just before the Yom Kippur War in Israel. He didn't bring his guitar. Somebody gave him a guitar when he got there. So what he was going there for, enough with the coincidences. So is he sort of intel negotiating? This is it's quite possible he was involved with, if not the real assassin for John Lennon. So this was when Diamond was staying on Hydra, this is 1980. Cohen was staying on Hydra as well. He disappeared between the 6th and the 14th December, didn't tell anybody, was very, very secretive about disappearing, but she knows he had disappeared. And when somebody talked to him later, he said he went to New York to buy Hanukkah decorations, but Hanukkah is in the 25th of November. I mean, he has these bizarre throwaway excuses. And John Lennon was shot outside the Dakota building on the 8th of December. So, it's probably not the place to go into detail because there's a lot of really good material about who did shoot John Lennon, and Mark David Chapman was a Manchurian candidate, was an MK Ultra, alter, and he stood outside, got Lennon's autograph. He said he didn't have anything against Lennon, and then apparently shot him. But he shot him with a revolver, with I think it's what it's called. I don't know anything about guns except that it was with hollow point bullets, whereas John Lennon died from non-hollow point bullets from the front. Chapman shot him in the back with one shot with his gun. But, these, what are they called? The autopsy reports, the coroner just seems to be doing sloppy jobs on these sorts of things, don't they? By not saying, hang on, there are other shooters. And so not so long ago, there was more information showing that there are shots from inside the Dakota building, to Lennon, who was walking towards the building, and they were the ones, the 3 bullet holes that caused his death. And one theory is that, well, either that was Cohen or Cohen was hypnotizing the doorman. He was a master of hypnosis. So you could look into that. In fact, I think even this material about the 2 shooters is not something that Ann Diamond was aware of, that it's now confirmed that Lennon did not die from Chapman's gun. And we know that Chapman was carrying Catcher in the Rye, and we know that many other of the shooters, the MK Ultra shooters, were carrying, like John Hinckley was also carrying Catcher in the Rye, which seems to be, and that's literally Chapman with Lennon. So when he came back to Hydra, apparently after that visit, Cohen was extremely depressed. But, what role he played, because he had kind of admired Lennon, he said, but he never talked about John Lennon again. And you'd also think if you'd just been in New York at the time that John Lennon, who's someone he knew personally and someone he admired, died, you'd mention it. But no, he was staying a block away, in a hotel a block away from the Dakota, and he didn't mention that he'd been in New York at that time, and he didn't want to talk to anybody about Lennon's death. He says, one has one's own destiny, but the older I get, the surer I am that I'm not running the show. You start to read these things and his lines with a bit more meaning and confusion than just this poetic rumination. So Cohen, as I said, is the bottom left with the hands in that position like that. That's a gesture you'll find on priest and rabbi, rabbis' graves, and very Orthodox Jewish people. And he made up his own symbol, and he called it I've got it in a minute, there's an infinite heart, but this is his symbol, his personal symbol that he created, was these hearts that look like the Star of Ramphun.
And also, I still do have my collected essays, all 700 or so pages. Yeah, almost 700 pages of topics.
What?
Intensely, and she has. I'm proud of her.
I took your advice and my own advice with that show we did with Ruckus, and got off social media for a long time and just started reading books instead. And
she
I
took
found
a big break.
a lot of
every time
stuff.
every time she takes a break from Twitter, she ends up reading like 10 books, and I'm like, you should just constantly take a break from Twitter. Just never stop taking breaks from Twitter.
But look at these books, man. They're not that fun, but they're really important.
This one was a beast. I can't believe let's start with the Folio Society classic here.
This is such a cool book, but it's also a very informative and
Babylon.
interesting book, because sometimes these can be kind of dry.
Hollywood, Babylon.
Yes, dusty, but it was very lively, and it pretty much talks about all of the first cities. So like every city of Sumer was a cult to an ancient god. So
each city had its own demonic cult. Okay.
Right. So the Anunnaki, can you see that? This Middle Earth right here? No, this is Mesopotamia. And so the very first cities were like Ur and Eridu, and these were to Inanna and Enki. And then you have Erech, and then you have Babylon, obviously, is one of them. Nineveh is one of them. So
a lot of Bible towns.
Yeah. So here he's just going through like Sumerian life. What is it like to be like one of the first people that have writing and all of this stuff? And it seems like a lot of the records that come out of antiquity were bookkeeping for the temple. So records of people paying tributes, taxes, sacrifices, slaves, all of that commerce is done right around the temple complex because the god is supposed to be there. And all of these things grow out of a cult, basically.
Yeah. Well, we know that, if you think back to Nebuchadnezzar in the book of Daniel, Nebuchadnezzar essentially had a giant idol kind of himself built. And of course, he tried to force everybody to worship the idol. And that's where we get, the stories in the book of Daniel. But these historic empires are, not all of them, but, they're mentioned in kind of a succession in the prophecies of Daniel, Zechariah, and Jeremiah. So we get a loose idea of these succeeding imperial powers. And even though the scriptures don't explicitly talk about this all the time, if you read the books of the Kings, for example, you'll find quite a bit of state and cult connections and how the state oftentimes tries to use the cult. I wrote an essay years ago about how the Israelites, when they fell into idolatry under Jeroboam and Rehoboam, they tried to utilize different worship sites because the legitimate temple was in the southern kingdom of Judah. And so the northern kingdoms wanted their own controlled ritual site. So they created Bethel and Dan, and those would become eventually connected to the Samaritans in the New Testament. So you get this kind of long-time connection between the state or the God King, the emperor, and his ritual cult. So this also reminds me, and I want you to get into your notes, this also reminds me of the book by Dvornik that is overlooked and unknown. It's a very obscure book, which I've covered it many times. I've mentioned it many times. We haven't done a whole lecture through the book, but it's the history of intelligence agencies all the way back to the ancient empires, particularly Egypt, Mesopotamia as well, and then into Byzantium. So how do the intelligence agencies work in these ancient empires and in Byzantium? It's a fascinating book. And the key point there is that the priests were also the members of the king's or the emperor's spy network. So he had a ritual cult run by priest spies. They weren't the only spies. There were also mailmen, were the early spies. But the ritual cult was directly connected to the espionage and intelligence apparatus, even in the ancient world. So things that we think of as maybe new discoveries to us these days when we figure out, oh, wait a minute, there's CIA connection to these different cults and this and that. No, this is actually the way that the ancient world functioned.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, everything from today, you can find a parallel in the very first cities. Definitely con men. Okay, so if we're talking about temple complexes and worship, I mean, long after some kind of weirdo Nephilim has left this place, and gone back to the stars or died or whatever happened to them, the priests keep up this worship and the idol is set in the place. And then so the priests are actually the ones who are taking all of the tribute and all of the food and all of the offerings, and then after everybody leaves and the priestcraft eats it, right? And so the god did it or whatever. And also you have a population that is extremely superstitious. So you have these groups that will...
Are they a little stitious or superstitious?
No, they're mega stitious. And so you have people taking advantage of that, saying you can pay me for blessings or curses. And so these are like actual professions in the ancient world of being paid for...
The ancient world's grifters.
Exactly. Yeah. What else? Taxes. I mean, all of this stuff comes from just the worship of in the beginning it was a ziggurat, right? And that was the center of town. And then you have your exorcists, you have witch doctors, you have all of the things that we have now. You have clans fighting each other. So in that time, it was like Babylon and Assyria, and the capital would move from Babylon to different cities, and because whoever had won these wars or skirmishes or whoever gods favored. And so you have these different ideas of religion going from like goddess worship to more like god worship. So they go from Inanna being the most important goddess to like Marduk in Babylon after those kinds of myths had taken over, like Marduk and Tiamat, right? So, but the things that carry through are basically like, can you say human TRAFF?
Just spell it.
Yeah. Human TRAFF, temple prostitution, worshipping of the goddess by sexuality. And so this is a book that we talk about in our live show where we talk about she is the gender-bending goddess, Inanna, right? And a lot of public sex rituals. So how they would legitimize kings in the ancient world was they would have a festival called Akitu, where the high priestess of Inanna and the king would have a union where they represented the goddess and the god Tamuzi, or Tammuz in the Bible, right? And then all of the people would follow, and this would be like the fecundity ritual. This is basically like in the old world, more was more. So the more babies, the more better. Not that we don't think that still, but it was the only thing that their mind was thinking of, was like producing lots of grain, producing lots of vegetables, producing lots of babies, because...
Well, babies are part of the economy. So.
Well, that is so true. And yeah, the more tributes you can give, if the more you're producing and the more stronger you can make your local god or goddess. And what was I going to say about babies? Oh, so that leads into this. So you need more babies because you need more sacrifices to give. And this is the pagan way. And so these books kind of outline like, and they're not even from a Christian perspective, they're from a scholar perspective, but they outline how different Christ and Christianity is set apart from all of the different pagan gods, even though they might have similarities in their stories. God, the Christian God is the only one that is not plied by a bunch of like bribed by offerings and requiring all of these blood sacrifices and things like that, but the pagan gods do. What do you think? Am I talking too much?
No, I mean, you talk to the audience.
Okay.
I have to keep monitoring all this insanity in the chat.
Okay, don't be insane.
Remember, you're talking to them.
So yeah, God of Christianity doesn't really need anything, but these gods do. They need the blood, they need the offering, they need the temple. So this is coming out in several of these different books by different authors, saying that this is a unique part of Christianity, is that God gives to us and not the other way around.
Yeah, one of the things that you find in the ancient pagan religions and their conception of their deities is that it's like a technology that you unlock, that you bribe or cajole into doing your will. So rather than us humbly submitting to the divine will and asking for God to grant it if it's in his divine providence, you're doing the rituals and doing the invocations and all this. You're paying the temple priests or whatever so that you can get what you want, and that might require getting rid of your firstborn for some sort of a successful harvest. And I was just reminded of the fact that when I was reading through Zephaniah, I forgot Zephaniah even talks about Molech, and the Israelites had sacrificed their youth to Molech. We're going to get into that in a minute because, eventually the Israelites who were given, rules and commands in the book of Moses, Leviticus, etc., not to get into these practices, not to fall into the Canaanite and, Babylonian and whatever practices. Many times over they actually do, and I forgot that Zephaniah actually mentions Molech by name, and that because they had forsaken God, and then even in Jeremiah, they built high places in Topheth, to the valley of Ben Hinnom, to burn their sons and daughters in the fire, which I did not command, nor did it ever enter into my mind, in Jeremiah 7:31. So Israel oftentimes failed and fell into these practices, and so this tendency within the religion of primitive Judaism or proto-Christianity, there were cults and groups within that would fall into human sacrifice, and that's where people get the idea that all of the Old Testament was this evil God who taught human sacrifice, which is not true. I mean, many times over, it's very clear that you do not do human sacrifice to the God of the Bible. That's one of the key things that sets him off against all the other deities. And so when we hear pagans and neo-pagans try to make this argument, it's just fundamentally not true according to the Old Testament.
Yeah, well, I mean, as long as you're talking about that, you might as well mention this book that I'm about 3/4 done, Human Sacrifice in History, Nigel Davies. And pretty much they all did it. They were all doing it. There is not one like neo.
This is just normal academic text, by the way. These aren't conspiracy books.
This is not a weird like Bible bookstore book. This is moral publishing. Like, it's just archaeology basically. And so pretty much every culture is doing it. Even the Israelites at some points when they are mixing with Canaanites. And this is where you get the idea that like Baal and Yahweh are the same, because they're constantly warring against each other and enslaving each other and mixing tribes and mixing religions over hundreds and thousands of years. But definitely the other tribes of the Israelites had that Tophet, and that's what the prophets were always railing against. And Jeremiah. So, I mean, name a culture and I'll tell you if they are big on it.
Well, one that often comes up that is believed to be not involved in this, but actually was Egypt.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Okay, so what they would do is when a pharaoh dies, he needs all of his servants and his wife and his, not his children usually, but all of his attendants and his things to go into the next world. They believed that the next life is just kind of like here, but a little bit different. And so you're going to need all of the things from this world that you want. And
in the next life.
Yeah. And so, yes, definitely human sacrifice in that way. If your pharaoh, your god king dies and you're real close to him, it was very typical that you would be sacrificed as well. And even your wife, like in India, that's called sati. So, and that was super ancient and very ubiquitous in India, sacrificing widows. And it even became a thing like widows are unlucky, or hags, or witches, or whatever, because they were trying to put peer pressure on widows to kill themselves so they wouldn't be a burden on society. But Egypt, I mean, every tomb they open has other people in there with them, so that's kind of silly to say Egypt didn't do.
So in their case, they weren't doing it to Ra, they were doing it because they just thought you would need this person in the next life.
Yeah, but in a way, Pharaoh was Ra on Earth,
right.
So...
But what I'm saying is it wasn't a sacrifice to placate an angry deity. It was to ensure that Pharaoh had, his posse with him in the next life.
What else?
Well, you were talking about the Babylonians.
Okay.
What was their unique approach to this question?
Yeah, so you have all your big hitters like Molech and
I mean, yeah, there's still human sacrifice going on today. So people in the chat are talking about India and the Thuggees and all that.
Oh.
It still goes on. But
Thuggees. That was in...
let's not go to that yet. Let's finish with the Babylonians.
Okay, so where I was going with this is temple prostitution and priestesses entering this involuntarily as children.
Yeah, just
Right.
try to use code words because it's just going to trigger the algorithm.
Okay, so Inanna becomes Ishtar
Right.
in Babylon, and this is where you get like the WHORE of Babylon.
Right.
Right. And all the cults that worship these mother goddesses that kind of like Venn diagram over each other, and Isis is one of them. But one of the things that they all have in common is TRANS and castration.
Yeah, castration.
Right. And just like self-harm, socialism, communism, lots like revelry, public displays of crazy harming yourself and beating and running around and acting
Like the prophets of Baal and when Elijah confronts them.
Yeah. So these are called the Gali or the Gala. And
This is where we get the term gala.
Yeah.
Okay. GALA.
Right. So now we're going into like more of
Kali protects us.
Greece and Rome.
The black sleep.
Because
Kali.
yeah, well,
Remember when Indiana Jones drinks the juice?
Yeah.
And he goes, Kali protects us. We are her servants. Remember?
This
He's under mind control.
Kalima Shaktide.
Yes.
That's
Kalima.
real.
Yeah.
And Shakti is like magic powers, I think.
That's right.
So give us your magic powers. But yeah, there's a whole quarter of a chapter in here about Kali. But do you want to hear about her?
No, I want to. Before we do that, let's get to the really spicy stuff, which is that there were ancient groups of people that castrated themselves and became TRANZ as part of the ritual prostitution temple cult.
Exactly. They're called Gali. They're called Gala. They were they migrated over in Greece and Rome, and they became more
By the way,
recognized.
Keep this in. I did want to mention though, when you look up the structure of a ziggurat, typically one of the first papers I ever wrote was about the Tower of Babel, and a lot of scholars believe that the Tower of Babel was structured in a kind of a step model like this, like an Aztec cake. And the reason for this, that all of the temples in the world end up taking this kind of structure. I mean, yeah, it's a basic, I guess, geometric engineering structure, but some people think that these are all kind of little mirrors of the Tower of Babel. So the idea was, we'll build a tower, quote, to ascend into heaven. Really, I think that just means that they wanted to build a towering structure that symbolized human defiance of God and the idea of the worship of Nimrod, a kind of a type of Antichrist. So it's not that they literally thought they were going to like climb into heaven, but it's symbolically a war on heaven and the erection of man as God. And man as God obviously serves Satan, and thus necessarily leads to this idea of human sacrifice at the top of the ziggurat. So there might also be, if the Book of Enoch has some tradition within it, which it does to some degree, it might also be just what is with all the retards in the chat today? Does this just lead to retards coming into the chat? Anyway, this is an important point. So you get a bunch of mini towers of Babel throughout the world, and to me this is kind of indicative of the fact that the Bible is accurate, because why would we have the same patterns and structures of ritual worship and ritual human sacrifice almost throughout the entire world if it wasn't a testament to the way Romans 1 talks about the universality of idolatry? This speaks to the history of Genesis. It speaks to the fall, all kind of being real. Otherwise, we wouldn't really. Why would we see all the same patterns and the same structures throughout all history? Also, yeah, Genesis 6. There might be a sense in which this origin of human sacrifice has its roots in the story of the Nephilim, because in the book of Enoch, they are the first to begin to require human sacrifice.
Well, also the Tower of Babel, it didn't have to be tall. It could have been like a crossroads to get to another dimension, the spiritual world, where you can contact the beings from the other dimension, right?
Yep.
Didn't have to be a physical thing. Where were we?
By the way, I'm not talking about our audience. I'm talking about these weirdos that show up that I've never seen before and they just say stupid stuff. The people that I'm booting, I'm not talking about our audience.
Okay. Oh, so the Gala.
By the way, MI6 looks like a ziggurat too. See?
Well, and that was the symbol of the EU too.
Yeah, the EU used a Tower of Babel on their poster. Okay. By the way, you guys want to support the stream, you can do so through Super Chat. Super Chat's run natively through YouTube, or you can do it through Streamlabs. Streamlabs link is pinned in the chat. It's also in the show description. And, of course, Streamlabs doesn't take a cut. So if you do want to support the stream, and I will be splitting the Super Chats with Jamie, you can use the Super Chat function on Streamlabs. Support the show, ask your questions. We're getting into, I mean, we got like a stack of like 10 esoteric texts. Now, before you get into that, I want to point out there is one thing that I've lectured on many times, and that is the idea that what if God is a bisexual? I'm not saying that, but Hermeticism, Gnosticism, and the Kabbalah have all taught that Adam Kadmon, or the original man, the proto-man, or perhaps God himself, is a bisexual deity with both organs or both genitalia. That's a esoteric androgynous teaching, and that's also why Baphomet is the secret god for a lot of the Hermetic cults and satanic religions, is because the idea is, really, if you're the highest god, you got to have both. You can't be either or, because that's a Neoplatonic assumption that metaphysically you're only better when you have both male and female qualities. So the true god has to be fully male and fully female, and that ends up being the Gnostic esoteric teaching of both ancient Platonists, Hermeticists, some of the Gnostics, and elements of the Kabbalah teach that God is bisexual. That would make sense then why we have in these ancient temple cults the idea of castration and or TRANZ.
In the Kabbalah or in the Gnostic Gospel, it's talking about making spirit and matter, Malkuth and Kether, male and female, into one. And when you make the two into one, the great work is done, they say in Gnosticism.
So I have the Cambridge Companion to Western Hermeticism and Western Mysticism and Esotericism. I've lectured through this entire text for you guys on my channel. The chapter on on the Kabbalah is interesting because, from a scholarly perspective, they're admitting that the original deity is a bisexual entity from Plato in Egypt, and this is identified with Adam Kadmon. So in strict deep Kabbalah, God is bisexual, and that might have an indication as to why some of the groups that we're talking about support the idea of TRANZ.
Well, have you heard of the Egyptian creation myth of Atum, where he Master the world into existence?
Yes.
So his hand is the female and he is the male, so it was
so most of these pagan perspectives end up being some kind of weird SEX cult.
They all are, and that's what I'm trying to say. People are like, goddess worship would be so much better because it would be gentle and Mother Nature. And no, it's temple, PROSTUTI. It's this stuff. So this whole scholarly paper is about the cult of the goddess, and they are contrasting Inanna, Ishtar, and the Hijra of India, and Kali again. So these are like crazy, bloodletting.
So people are trying to. This is so annoying. It's both bisexual and androgyny, or having both organs, hermaphroditic. And I'm gonna read it. The whole chapter is bisexuality. So is the audience just people who just want to like play gotchas today? In the Sephirot, the Decad is actually one and apparently a apparent separation that can demand harmony and give rise to polar bisexual structures within the Kabbalistic notion of the Godhead itself. This is based on the bisexual nature of primordial man, that he had two sexes, right? This bisexuality was from Plato. So you assume that I'm talking about the word can be used not just in the sense of having sex with two different people, but having both sexes. That's how it's used in this. Just go get the scholarly text and read it. Go ahead.
And another goddess is Kybella. I think that's how you pronounce her name. I had to look it up. So Kybella, Rhea, Magna Mater, Inanna, Ishtar, all of these like sex mother goddesses. Her cults are like crazy troons.
Can't say that.
Oops.
Told you not to say that on YouTube.
Now what do we do?
Just keep going.
Okay.
So it's just going to mean that it'll be demonetized and it won't get promoted in the algorithm. So.
Oh. Sorry.
I don't care, but the algorithm's just going to not promote the show.
Okay. Well, undoubtedly, the most shocking practice by these people was the CASTRA.
Right.
Cutting your hot dog off. And what else? So these people had political groups in ancient Rome and ancient Greece that were recognized by the Senate. So they're already infiltrating into like public forums and having golly rights and like they are recognized parts of society.
Yeah, so they became a kind of a welfare class too. This is something you pointed out that not many people know, is that they're the goblin socialist Antifa of the ancient world because they were also part of the welfare class.
Yeah.
Explain that.
Well, because they would give like they would travel around from city to city, reading fortunes, doing tarot cards, doing dancing, giving concerts, and a lot of them, if you didn't like give them enough money, they would lift up their robes to show you their scars, and that was like a curse to you. That now you've seen that.
You can't make this up. So that TRANZ would curse you by showing you their area.
They're mutilated.
When you didn't give them money as part of the EBT cards that they were due.
Yeah.
Oh, that's not a joke.
I know. So anybody who says like goddess worship would be so nice and it's just like pregnant women sitting around being fanned and stuff, it's not. It's this stuff. And they were very much...
No, this is a key point. So people think that the Gaia worship and the ancient goddess worship was, it was so peaceful when women were in charge. And no, it was this.
Yeah.
Women in charge of the ritual goddess cult, what I'm saying.
Yeah, but a lot of times they weren't even in charge of it. It was still male priests. So like whoever's weaker is going to get trampled on in these types
Well, it's like Wilhelm Reich said, in order to have the end of the patriarchy, you have to promote free love and the goddess and no boundaries for pansexuality. And then the patriarchy would fall. But of course, he's a man saying this and trying to engineer and fund this from the background.
They enjoy acknowledged begging rights. Their primary religious function is to appear at weddings and childbirths to call down the blessings of the goddess. So I even put...
So they're welfare queens who are TRANZ cult ritual Antifa.
Right. And so let's talk about this goddess that they're worshiping in India. Was a big part of that paper is Kali, right? And Kali's cult is...
Call on me, Kali, 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 come and see. So, I'm the best deity I used to be.
Kali's worshippers were called thugs or thuggies, and this is definitely where we get the word for gangsters.
Kali Ma protects us. We are her children.
Her cult is primarily men who murder other men. For Kali, and it is bad luck to murder women.
Why would they do that? Why would they?
Because she likes women. She's a protectress of
women.
and
she just wants to get rid of men, but she sends men to get rid of men.
Right.
Okay.
And what they would do is they roam around and they go to a town or a village and they send their best looking people into the town to kind of befriend other travelers that are passing through.
Brother. Yes. Do not redeem.
Yes.
Sir.
And like, go with us. And
sir,
and so,
you must be put to death, sir. Come back, sir. You need to be put under the knife, sir.
No.
Sir, we meant to put you to death, sir. Come back, sir. Bloody fuck you, buddy. Bloody fuck you, buddy. I'm sorry, have a good day. Bloody fuck you, buddy, you did it right. Sorry, have a good day.
Yes.
Okay, have a good day.
That's how they do it. No, but okay, so they send their most attractive thuggy into town to rizz up fellow travelers, and they're like, oh, it's really dangerous.
And that's this big buff guy that beat up Indiana.
Yeah.
Remember he beat up Indy?
Yeah,
go ahead.
And they're like, it's really dangerous. I've heard there's like muggers on the road, and maybe if you travel with our group, there's safety in numbers. And the people are like, oh, sweet, okay, yeah, we'll travel with you. So they start traveling and they gain all their trust, and a couple days into it, while everybody's sitting around the fire, they give like a signal or a code word, and all the thuggies immediately like turn to the person next to them and choke them at the same time. And usually like with a yellow rope with a coin on it, and like choke them out, and then...
It makes me want to get a book on the thuggies, although this is false. They're not the world's first organized gang of professional assassins. That existed in the ancient world, as you're talking about. It existed amongst the Hashashim. It existed amongst the Jews, known as the Sicarii, who were they tried to assassinate the Romans, the Zealots. So, but I mean, maybe the thuggies go back to the ancient world. Would they say they're like the ancient true Hindu believers?
They're pretty old. Kali worshippers are pretty old. What was I gonna say about thuggies? Oh, so you have to kill somebody to get initiated.
So are you saying that Spielberg got this one right?
Pretty much. Well, they don't eat your heart or anything. They just choke you. They don't like reach in and
Well, it looks like they're just choking in these pictures. So
maybe they cut up some people, but like the usual way is a young man finds an old man and chokes him to death, and that's how he's initiated into thuggies. And
look at this. I got thuggy. You could get a thuggy hoodie right here. You want to get a thuggy beanie?
But it doesn't...
We could send this to Temple when he becomes an assassin.
It doesn't matter to them in India. And one of these guys was making the really good point that Hindu worldview is just leads to total destruction of your society, as we have seen.
Brother, that is why we come to America.
Because
Brother, your streets are dangerously undershitted.
Right. So you made me lose my train of thought when I'm laughing.
Well, now I'm thinking about.
Oh, that's why they have shit in the street, because
Yeah.
when you die, you just come back, and it's not even important. Life is not a sacred.
Life is devalued because you're coming right back. So
That's why they're like, oh, just jump on the funeral pyre with your husband because you have nothing left and you're just a mouth to feed now, and you.
And that's why they would tell him to hop on the wives to die, right?
Yeah, sati.
Yeah.
And then another crazy thing about not just India but lots of other places is foundation sacrifice. So every time they're building a building,
right,
they're gonna just like throw a couple people into the foundation for good luck. Anytime they are planting a new crop or whatever, it's like, oh, grab a kid and like sprinkle his blood because, you know, for the gods or whatever. So foundation sacrifice was huge in India, and there's even like superstitions like do not walk, you know, in construction sites at night, even to this day, because like they just kick you in.
So did they have priests like Mola Ram or not? Did the thuggies have these Mola Ram priests?
I'm not maybe there was like a leader of the gang, but they didn't have like a super structured ritual. It was more like I described, ambushing campers.
Because this, like, pretty soon the papacy is going to be Mola Ram, right? We'll have he's basically, this is like at Vatican III. It'll be presided over by Mola Ram, and then we'll get a thuggy rite liturgy for the Novus Ordo.
So this
and the
is
Roman
more,
Catholics will still defend it. Oh, it's based in trad because it's ancient thuggy rite. What's up?
That would be more, according to the text I read, would be like the Aztecs. That was huge
I knew that.
in their part of the world. So what they would do is wait for specific astrological things to be happening that nobody else knew about. And just like in Mel Gibson's Apocalypto, like that was an integral part that a lot of people catch on, is that the priestcraft are record keeping of astrology and all of these other like signs that the general public is not, and they use that on their superstition and say they wait for the, you know, eclipse, and they're like, we have to kill 100 people to get rid of the eclipse, and people are like, okay, kill. But
You're right. So Spielberg added the priest element.
What did it say?
What you said? Spielberg added the Mola Ram. Mola Ram's a great character though. But
so Mola Ram is an Aztec high priest plus a Kali thug.
Soon the Christian God will fall, and then the Hebrew God will fall. Remember when he says that?
Yeah, but okay. So since we're talking about Aztecs for a second, a lot of people think that the Native Americans were super peaceful and the colonialists were assholes, and you know, colonizers or whatever. It was more of a mixed bag. It was like there were cool tribes and there were crazy tribes, there were cannibal tribes, and there were like peaceful, thriving tribes. And the big ones with a big religion, like let's say the Aztecs, they would go around kidnapping people from the smaller tribes and bringing them back to the capital and sacrificing them. And that's why when Cortez got there and the conquistadors got there, a lot of tribes aligned with them because they're like, these Aztecs are sacrificing everyone. Can you please help us overthrow them? And the conquistadors were like, bet. And that's how
we're not actually far from the Mola Ram liturgy, because you guys forget we did multiple. Everybody's already forgotten in the weekly scandals of the papacy. Everybody's already forgotten the Amazonian rite, which was incorporating all these indigenous pagan practices. And this is when we had Pachamama, and Pachamama is a human sacrifice deity. So when Francis honored Pachamama and they were rolling out this Amazonian rite ritual of the liturgy, I'm literally like not kidding when I say we are almost at the traditional Latin thuggy rite ritual, the traditional Hindi. It'll be ancient Hindi text, so that'll make it more magical and powerful because it's ancient. Go ahead.
That's a thing that a lot of people need to realize about Hinduism and yoga and these Eastern religions is they do not value human life. They don't value women like you think they do. They are not like peaceful, feminine, worshiping pacifists.
Yeah, that's all bullshit that modern social engineers and cult leaders craft. NGOs, think tanks, foundations, the United Nations, they all sell it as this peaceful, indigenous, organic, we're not consumerist. We believe in living off the land, like indigenous, which is not really what any of this is. That's the thing. The reality is what you're saying.
And even Buddha didn't have a very high opinion of women, so I don't understand why women would be attracted to that.
Well, nobody knows what the religions actually teach. Everybody chooses the Instagram, yoga mat like version of it. And
I just got my Gaia yoga mat, and it has the picture of the Buddha. It's spiritual. It's really spiritual.
Just meditate.
Just meditate.
So who cares what really was the, religious teaching? It's the same with like the histrionic Roman Catholic women saints that are cutting themselves, engaging in the same type of self-harm, but you have to accept that as Roman Catholic sanctity because it's in 2 papal documents. You have to accept Margaret Mary Alacoque.
And only Christianity and Orthodoxy especially elevates women above this.
Dano has a good point. Buddha was just a dark triad player. He had the dark triad traits, and he was a player.
He was just
did he even like women?
Dad.
Oh, was he really?
No, didn't he leave like the day his wife gave birth? He was like, "I'm out. I don't understand any of this. I don't know what."
All I ever think about is Keanu as the Buddha. You've never seen it, but it's if you've seen Little Buddha, it's funny.
Yeah.
Look at this. In fact, it would be worth watching. So here he is, he's got his macking on his princess, but he decides that he's got too many pleasures, and he doesn't. His father walled, you know the story? Mm-hmm. His father walled him in to keep him from the taint of the world, and then he decided it was too easy, so he went to go experience the world. Anyway, but all I ever think about is Keanu playing like.
Whoa.
He's doing brown face, dude. Look, it's brown face Keanu. And he's like the Buddha or whatever. But he's a perfectly cast like California guy as the Buddha, bro. And remember he faced off against Bodhisattva in Surf movie.
Yeah.
Johnny Utah versus Bodhisattva.
Who disappeared into the waves.
I just went blank. Point Break. So he's fighting Bodhi, the Buddha, in Point Break. Then he becomes the Buddha, only a little bit later.
Someone just said I should have Sister Anastasia on my show.
Well, you see all of this, and you think, "Oh, look how mystical and spiritual, and this is so like profound." And then when you look at the recent video, shout out to our, one of our editors who edited together. Did you see this? What's up? Look at it, brother. What you doing, brother? We've been destroyed. We're trying to poop on the things. It's just mud. I'm sure it's just mud.
I've seen a lot.
No cooking by river. Do not cook by river.
Well, first I'm making a simple point that.
Do no TV, brother. No TV, brother. Get out of water, brother. Block you for this. Now I realize. The one that I can't. Very mystical, very spiritual. Very much spiritual. Look at Keanu. Look how skinny he is.
Well, dude, I want to watch this.
You should watch it. It's funny. It's. Well, you'll have to see it. We should do an analysis of it. It's pretty funny, actually. But
man.
So he's got him a Desi chick, and then he just is like, "No, I'm out of here, dude." So is this the deadbeat dad thing you're talking about? Because he leaves her.
Yeah. Man, Indian women dress is so beautiful.
They're just very spiritual.
The way.
Very spiritual.
I just wish they had a better worldview because
they're very spiritual.
Their dress and aesthetic is like probably the most beautiful in the world. I don't know. It's top. It's up there.
Okay, Jamie wants to be a Desi.
I know.
She wants to be a princess here with Keanu in this temple.
Wear sari and sparkles.
She wants to be in this Keanu temple here, and Keanu's in brown face. There is Jamie. Look at Jamie, so brown, so cooked. You are like a patty of my armpit. You are the beautiful patty of my armpit.
Somebody just said I should have Sister Anastasia on the channel, and your wish already came true. I mean, I didn't have her, but I reviewed her book on the YouTube members section on my channel, and we talk all about this and a little bonus book that was a funny thing about it wasn't funny, but it was another lady who converted to Orthodoxy from a weird cult where they spanked each other.
Whoa.
Yeah.
No, you're not talking about this girl.
No. I don't know where the book went.
Well, so people are asking, wait a minute, is that Keanu? Yes. Keanu played the Buddha in the 1993 movie, Little Buddha. The movie is terrible, but it's so bad it's funny. It's actually worth watching because it's actually funny.
Life.
And so Bridget Fonda is tasked with like finding the new Buddha, right? Because he gets reincarnated. And it turns out it's this little blonde kid, looks like Macaulay Culkin, in Buena Vista. So she finds the new Buddha, and then they send the Dalai Lama, who by the way seems like a creep, right? Who kisses kids on the mouth. Remember that? And for those that don't know, like a lot of this Buddha shit, it's a bunch of same old cult, mind control, MK Ultra, human trafficking, tied in with the CIA. We talked about it for forever. So Tibetan Buddhism is pretty dark when you really study it. I'm not an expert on it, but it's pretty dark when you study it.
Well, there is a left-hand path of Tibetan Buddhism, so you.
Hey, is that Chris Isaac?
It looks like him.
What is he doing in this movie? Anyway, yeah, there is. The Buddhists have the left-hand path where the Tibetan Buddhists, where you do all the evil that you can so that you've experienced evil, so that you know evil and good.
Well, since we're talking about Buddhism, okay, so Sister Anastasia, And again, I go through this whole book on my channel. It's called You Are Mine. She was studying to be in Lam Rim, which is like the super Buddhas.
Well, I've never heard of that spell.
Lamrim. Lam Rim. That's how Buddhism.
Okay. I'm guessing that's not Keanu Reeves' Hollywood Buddhism.
No, Lam Rim as a path.
Well,
So
this dude's taking it serious. This boomer's taking it serious.
they
too.
are super serious, and I'm not surprised that she ended up becoming a nun because whatever.
Lamrim is two Tibetan words meaning stages of the path. So stages of what path?
Okay, I'm sorry. I'm not trying to cut you off. I've just never heard of this.
Yeah.
So this is a path designed by the Buddha. So it's the path that he took, and it's a path that he's inviting us to follow. So it's not a path on the ground that Well, Lamrim is two Tibetan words.
That's boring. This guy's got at least a night. It almost looks orthodox. But
It does,
pagan, right?
yeah.
How are you? My name is Jason, or my monk's name
What's
is
up, Jason?
Gawa. Today I would like to
Oh, so they
share
take names too, like Christians do.
with you just a little bit
And so do
about
Mormons.
actually Buddhist philosophy. It's coming from one teacher we're calling Buddha or Siddhartha Gautama, who came in India more than 2,500 years before.
Do you know about? We've covered this many times. So the CIA reached out to use them. It's called the CIA Tibetan program against China.
Tiny Mustache Man also used
Right.
a elite Tibetan monk army
Well,
as his personal.
the Dalai Lama at that time was pro Tiny Mustache Man.
Yeah, so she had quite an interesting life. She was in and out of rehab, and then she like tried to become this super strict Buddhist until she met a Father Theophan, and she was like, this is the way, and she had to get out of all of her cults. So she was like doing plant medicine, ayahuasca, psychedelics, Buddhism, womb healing.
Does she say what was like the main?
She was cult maxing for sure.
No, but I'm saying, what was like the breaking point where she went with Christianity?
Meeting that priest and saying he was like angelic and beautiful, and also some like dark things that would like visions of demonic stuff versus Christ-like visions, visiting monasteries, and some spiritual warfare.
You can keep talking on this. Talk to the audience.
Yeah, so
I'm
I mean,
looking
if you
for
want
different
to
links.
anything you want to know about this book, that's already on my channel. So we can. But your wish already came true. Whoever requested that. So we were talking about antiquity and Mesopotamia, Sumer, all of these crazy kings that you hear about that like slaughtered people, and Zimri-Lim and Sargon and these warlords. So all of that part of history was, you know, these competing cults basically warring against each other. And that's kind of the point we were trying to make on that show about face lords, is like, now it's cyber cults. And I was afraid something bad was going to happen. That happened because people are so crazed and cult-like that it's becoming dangerous to say things in public now. If you catch my drift, if I want to talk.
Yeah, I'm just trying to find where the Nazis and the there's a book on this actually I read years ago where the Dalai Lama was. It had nothing to do with being beige. It's just to do with geopolitical powers. So if you think it's beige, it's nothing to do with that. I mean, it's like they do all the same weird sex cult stuff, even though you think it's this. I'm talking about with the elites. I'm not talking about the average mind-washed Buddhist monk.
And that's one of the things that she was saying about her gurus, is she's like, they came on to me, and I'm like, I knew it, because they're always like, I am Guru Sat Shiva
I
Lingam.
just want to touch your butts.
Yeah.
But it is spiritus.
You need the Shiva Lingams in your yoni.
What does Frank say? Remember when they create a health cult? And Frank says, time to get you in the healing bag.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
A lot of new age tale.
Yes, exactly. It's just creepers creeping. And even Gandhi, he let his wife die because he was trying to reject Western medicine, but it was good enough for him when he got malaria.
He had all kinds of babes. He was all over the place.
He would want young women to sleep in the bed with him. And anyway,
Well, people don't know Gandhi was actually a theosophist. He went to Madame Blavatsky's funeral, so a lot of people think that he was British intelligence as well. Eternal Bugman became a member. Catherine Long became a member. Archon Games became a member. Says, Jay, You and Jamie, can you consider doing a stream where you review dating profiles? Actually, we are going to do this. We're going to do a advice for guys and girls dating podcast, and that's actually a good idea to also review and make fun of dating profiles. That sounds perfect.
Yeah, we're going to do a love stream.
Yes.
And then you can call in because I think I can heal incels with my healing advice.
I'm skeptical, but I'll listen. David Hampton became a member. What's up? Sam became a member. A Panini. I wonder what name they'll give to the first 15-minute cities in Gaza and Ukraine. Yes, get creative and come up with a name. Volturo, $5. Dire Squad, stand up. Thank you so much. V Scott, $5. I love when you have Jamie on, and I love having Jamie on again. Thank you, V Scott. Jub, do you think the sanctuary at the top of the ziggurats is where the Nephilim were produced? Who knows? I mean, I read the Book of Enoch a long time ago, and I don't remember all the details because it's like the first several chapters is the story of the Watchers and the human sacrifice, the Nephilim, and all that they demand, and then it turns into these visions of mountains, and it becomes very difficult to interpret. King Og of Bashan's bed was found at the top of one. Yeah, it could be. 7-11, $10. Thank you for your videos. God bless you. Thank you so much. Who is like God? 35 czars. Jay, you saved me from a modern cult, the Freemasons. God bless you. Well, that's great to hear. God bless you. Have a good stream. Shout out if you ever want.
An internal view.
I think you meant interview.
Oh.
Jack Wonders, $5. Just doing my part. Appreciate you guys. I became a catechumen next week. Thanks to you, mate. Well, thank you, Jack. Appreciate that. Nico, $5. Odin would a gun and beard oil. Odin would a guns and beard oil kind of soy man. Odin was a guns and beard oil soy man.
Do you want to talk about the peaceful Vikings for a second?
Yeah, let's go into Vikings because we forget those, and there is the rise of the neo-pagan stuff, Odin stuff everywhere now. So and I've been talking about this for like 6 years.
Oh yeah, everyone was so super peaceful until Christian colonizers came along. Ever heard of the blood eagle?
Is that what's on Odin's?
That's
a crow.
What they do to you, and they cut you back, and they take your lungs out and spread everything out.
That was in a horror movie.
So they did definitely do human sacrifice to the gods. Battles obviously was
we was Vikings.
A mega battle or mega sacrifice to the gods.
We was Vikings.
And weird Viking stuff is coming out with Charlie Kirk.
What?
Like when they said we'll see you in Valhalla and stuff like that.
That's just. I don't know. People make a big deal about him using some word like it was code. I mean, he's just a person talking. It's not. And maybe as a Hindu, is Kash Patel a Hindu or is he Catholic? I don't know, but maybe they believe, Hindus believe that all the religions are the same.
Yeah.
So like a Hindu will come into a church and like honor and praise the priest because they just think it's another way to go to the deities.
So another thing they would do is called ergi, which is if the Viking men thought that another man was acting too feminine, they would kill him. But
what that actually means isn't what you guys think. Oh, those bees. No. It's go ahead.
Well, if you didn't want to, like, say, raid a monastery or do murder or pillaging or whatever, if you were starting to have a conscience, because the missionaries were coming to the Viking tribes and they actually did end up converting, but in that process, if you were becoming more Christianized, you were seen as feminine and you were liable to be put out of the tribe or just killed or banished.
So what it means is not, honor, duty, defending your people. No, if you won't go loot and pillage a Christian church, then you get, what is it?
Ergi.
What does that mean? You get beat up? What?
Yeah, any kind of punishment they feel like,
So, yeah, peace was feminine. And this is a berserker. This is, you try to invoke the animal to take you over to fight, right? The wolf boys, the wolf pack. Remember in Northman?
Yeah.
When he did this dance before raiding the village?
So, a lot of...
And remember, it was Bjork that was the witch.
I know. One thing that all these cults have in common is drugs. So let's talk about Greece for a second, because these goddesses of the ancient world became gods also. Were syncretized into like the pantheon of Zeus and then Roman religion, right? So now you have...
Somebody said the Vikings were all cat boys.
No, they're the wolf. Who's that one weird guy? Jack Donovan?
Jack Donovan, yeah. Crowleyan guy who creates his own wolf pack.
Yeah. So where is the Greek book? Okay, yeah, so here, Greece and Rome, you have your mystery schools and worshiping, what's her name? Ceres and Persephone.
Hold on. So in the Northmen, right, Bjork, I think she gets burned up because she's the witch of the first village. She's like the sorcerer shaman of the village that they raid. And then when he gets caught and he's a prisoner of the other one, and then you remember Anya Taylor-Joy is the sorceress, and she's the witch in this part. and they organize a psyop where they give the whole village mushrooms.
Yeah.
Remember?
Yeah.
So she's using mushroom witchcraft, right?
Yes.
So what I'm asking is, according to Kotel, he says that the Nordic tribes did utilize mushrooms.
Yes.
Did you read about any of that?
Not specifically that. That's in like that Terrence McKenna book.
I don't trust him.
But ooh, made by Jim Bob people. It just came. That's nice of
I'm
them.
gonna need a mascara. This is what Kotel's always talking about.
Mm-hmm.
And this is where you get Father Mushroom.
Yes. And some people put Santa Claus in that
That's what I'm
category.
saying. That's what he talks
because
about.
the reindeers eat the mushrooms
Mhm.
and fly and all that. So in Greece, goddess worshipping became mystery schools. The Eleusinian mysteries, in particular, they would use a drug drink called kykeon, as part
Yeah,
of
that's in
their...
this. We cover this. This is the Eleusinian mysteries, the kykeon, which is believed to be a hallucinogenic thing.
Mm-hmm. So yes, sex, drugs, and drum beats. So basically, rock and roll is how you make a cult. That and superstition. Remember when we did that show, like top 10 top 10 ways you know you're in a cult or something like that? It was classic, but you should go back and watch that because what we're talking about is how easily you can be initiated into a cyber cult now, and it's so dangerous. But the ways to get you interested in this are super psychological, easy tricks that people have been using since the beginning of time.
I'm listening to you. I'm just trying to find the name of this. Tomty. Tomty is this little guy that's like a little
Oh, here's you
gnome
know.
hyperborea, baby. Look at him. That's Tomty. And he's associated with mushrooms. That's Father Mushroom, Father Toadstool, right?
Uh-huh. Oh,
This is
David
a-
the Gnome.
Yeah, exactly.
Remember him?
Yeah. That's Swedish grandmas are going to tell you this.
Hi, it's Mrs. M. I'm
Tompton.
here at the Donald Gordon Museum in Scandia, Minnesota.
Yeah, that's him.
I'm sure that everybody is talking.
Well, allow me to change your mind.
Oh, okay.
Everybody loves this when we go. Okay. Of course, if you've never seen one of the best riff tracks, Father Frost is one of the best. It's a classic. And Father Frost has Tomty, or Father Mushroom, or whatever he's supposed to be. I don't know what he is.
Now we know what cult you're in. Tomty.
But if you want to, this is why we became Russian Orthodox, is because of what's the guy's name? He turns into a bear. Anyway, go ahead.
Oh, Bear Schnupp? No.
No, that's from The Office.
Oh.
I'm going blank on his name. Lemminkainen? Maybe it's Lemminkainen. Go ahead.
What were we talking about? Oh, Greece.
Riff tracks.
Do you remember in Midsummer the shaman was a slow boy? Their village shaman.
Yeah,
That was weird.
that was weird.
Let's build a cult around a slow boy and his revelations.
Oh, here's Father Mushroom. See, I've already played this clip. No, this is when he turns into a bear. Russo-Finnish folktales of the Nordic Russian lands. Where is... Oh, it kind of has a Cinderella element to it. So basically this goofy 1960s movie that Riff Tracks made fun of, it's a combination of like 5 or 6 different old folk tales, Russo-Finnish folk tales. And eventually they get to like Father Frost, who is basically Santa Claus, right here.
Mm-hmm.
But he has a name in Russian. I always forget the name of him. What's the name for the Russian Santa Claus, the pagan Santa Claus? And every time I bring this up, they're like, this is a Soviet thing. I know it's a Soviet thing, but it goes back older than the Soviets. But they wanted a, like, here it is. When he goes to, here's Father Frost's palace.
Killed your girlfriend.
Good widow's son. Greetings, Grandfather Frost. Have you come for nesting? For nesting?
Oh, shut up. I hate you already, and I don't even know you.
Ivanushka, she's...
Why do I even bother to look like Simon Le Bon?
He does look like Simon Le Bon. Ivanushka.
And she's smiling that she's alive.
There you go. See, Father Frost is basically Dead Moroz, that's it. Dead Moroz is who this is.
I never heard of him.
Yeah, you have. I've brought it up in the past. See?
Oh, weird.
He's a Slavic mythological character who's kind of sort of Santa Claus.
So if you take Dead Moroz and Coca-Cola, you get Santa. Okay.
I mean, look at him there.
Whoa, dude.
But he's just like Father Frost in Father Frost.
Yeah.
Right? Anyway, do you remember this Mystery Science Theater?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's a classic.
Perfect drink.
This is the witch.
What you talking about, Frost?
Anyway, where are we at? What's going on?
Eleusinian Mysteries and Ancient Greece.
In the Kaikion.
Yeah.
Yeah, Kotal talks about this a lot.
So that's a huge cult, and that's where we get our ideas of modern day theater, right? And
From the Eleusinian
play
Mysteries?
acting. Yeah. Because
Yeah. I mean, there probably is an overlap. Like the first chapter in this Cambridge Companion about the ancient mysteries and the Eleusinian mysteries, it does talk about it like it's a ritual play of dramaturgy and all that.
well, even the word dramenon, it was part of their ritual.
See, look, Kaikion
Yep.
potion, and it might be similar to LSD,
Yeah.
which would give you a intense drug trip when you converted.
And this was also like a fertility type earth worshipping goddess. It was about Ceres and Persephone, and Persephone goes into the underworld
Demeter,
for 6
yes,
months.
I've got
and
Demeter,
back,
Persephone, yep.
Yeah, so she is married
Coming
to
back from the
Hades
underworld.
in the wintertime, and then in the springtime she's allowed to come back.
And this is from, as Kotel pointed out, the Gordon Wasson study. Abby Hoffman and Gordon Wasson says, The Road to Eleusis, Unveiling the Secrets of the Mysteries. Gordon Wasson, who was sent by Macy Foundation and the CIA as a banker to go and find the entheogens to produce LSD. See?
And so this is an interesting cult because they were interested in people with money. So as long as you had enough, you could, for donations and worshiping and keep the cult going. So it's a like modern day cults like Rosicrucians. I noticed you have to donate a lot of money.
Shocker.
Yeah.
You must donate much of your income for the seeds to be creating new lives.
And
Right. It's the same with the TV preachers, the seeds of faith, where you have to give money and then it comes back to you tenfold.
Right.
That's your seed of faith. That's what, like Kenneth Copeland, they all say this stuff.
Well, and you'll find this funny. On the day of the ritual or the festival, everybody has to bring piglets as a sacrifice. So they were like pig piggies.
Pay piggies,
Yeah.
literal pay piggies.
Yeah, literal pig piggies. So
Yeah, I know. Wasson was a banker for J.P. Morgan. He was sent there by, I think, the Macy Foundation money, and it was at the behest of CIA to create and to process LSD from the entheogens.
So then you've got your other cults, Dionysus. Who else? Everybody had their own.
Well, don't forget, I mean, Egypt too, like we were watching Penny Dreadful, and you have the idea of the Ogdoad, and the there's also one for 9, and then there's one for 10, the 10 cities of Egypt. And they all have different deities, and they all have different, like the Enneagram comes from these 9 deities of Egypt, right? So that's just another version of the same gods passing from culture to culture under different names.
Well, Isis, they call her the goddess of 1,000 names. So there's basically just like one female
Mother
goddess,
right.
and then she has like all these different attributes and names, like Isis Sekhmet, Isis, whatever. What was I going to say about Greece and cults? Rome.
Did anything mention Zoroastrians being involved in any human sacrifice?
Yeah, not really.
Yeah. I mean, the Mithras cult was more of an elite cult where they would sacrifice a bull to baptize you with the bull blood.
They were military cults. So.
And also nothing to do with Christianity. So people will find the most superficial connections and say, oh, look, Christianity is a Mithra cult because of baptism. Yeah, but it's totally different ideas of like baptism in a bull's blood versus water. Yeah, it's totally different.
Well, funny you mentioned that because several different cults all had the sacrificing of a bull as one of their central rituals, and so much that they shared temples because they had a place to sacrifice a bull.
Well, that was all throughout the Old Testament, just because a bull or a cow was like a really high-priced sacrifice.
Yeah.
Because you could live from that.
Yeah.
So it was a very, wealthy person's sacrifice.
So yeah, Mithras, Kybella, that other goddess, and some other ones, they shared temples because they had the proper bull sacrificing apparatus there. But Mithras, it was so creepy, that movie we watched called Conspiracy, because at the end of it, they take you through the modern day ritual of Mithras, and at the end they're like, Mithras is my crown. But it was kind of like that. It was very anti-female, anti-woman, people who wanted to just be like career military or career like assassins or spies would be in the cult of Mithras.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Career assassins?
Career, espionage.
Because they're military guys.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, as you probably know, in front of Solomon's temple, of course, you have the altar of burnt offering. Let's see if we can make this big. And the reason I'm bringing this up is that, we get a lot of atheists, pagans, people who don't really understand what the Old Testament religion was all about, which was proto-Christianity, and what Orthodox Christianity teaches in continuity with the Old Testament. So basically you have in Solomon's temple this outer portico here, where you have these lavers of washings for ritual washings. For us, those were proto-baptisms. They were foreshadowing of what we do in Christianity in terms of the entrance ritual of baptism. So before you could go to the temple and do your worship, you had to be clean, you had to be ritually clean, and that was symbolic of being morally clean. So ritual and ceremonial cleanliness, even in the Old Testament, were supposed to be about moral cleanliness, hence circumcise your hearts, as Jeremiah says. But you'll notice over here on the right is the altar of the burnt offering, where, for example, if you brought a bull to be sacrificed, this was, again, a